Committee for Annual Conference 2019. Obviously, as usual, there's a few domestics that I need to highlight to you for this weekend. There are no planned fire alarm tests. So, if any alarm is sounded, please respond and use the indicated fire exit to the left and right of the room. The muster point is in the main car park in front of main reception. Anyone requiring assistance, please notify a member of the ACC, association staff or Hilton staff. First aid cover this weekend is through the Hilton Hotel or association staff. There is a first aider on duty all weekend and a defibrillator is available in the hotel's business centre. I am already a trained first aider and always willing to practice my skills, especially the kiss of life. Okay, I know you wouldn't rather, but the offer is still there. But please, all joking aside, if you do need any assistance, please ask somebody. Please note the information in your conference booklet on page 8, which covers code of conduct, security, health and safety, and first aid provision for all delegates, guests, staff over the conference weekend. It's very important to note that you're required to be security conscious in this day and age, especially do not leave briefcases, packages unattended, especially between the sessions. So if you do notice anything suspicious, again, notify one of the members of staff. But in no circumstances should you touch it, we'll get an RAF policeman to do that for us. Please take care when coming to the rostrum and the stage. I'll tell a team here to help you. And the way to come to the rostrum, for speaking on resolutions, on my right, your left, there is a front row of seats reserved. The stairs are here on my right-hand side, and you come up to your rostrum and present as normal. Please be careful when you're going down. There will be a member of staff there to help you if you do need any assistance. Failing that you don't want to come to the stage and you don't feel you can make it, there are 4 tellers with 4 roving mics in the room. Please put your hand up and we will come and bring a roving mic to you. We have a wonderful marketplace. It's located next door in the Viscount room, and the association staff corporate partners are on a number of stalls. Hopefully you've already seen them last night or earlier this morning, but if not, please go and visit. They will only be open till 7:15 today, but to ensure you go there, that's where the coffee and lunch are. The nearest toilets, ladies and gentlemen, are to my left, out through the main doors and just across the foyer. The conference office is just outside, again off the main foyer, manned from 8:30 until the end of business for the day and tomorrow morning. At any time, if you require assistance, contact a member of your ACC or member of staff. But if there is an emergency, Hilton have a 24-hour reception, so you can dial down from your rooms, a concierge service there, or there's a conference telephone number on page 9 of your brochure. The ACC members on duty in the room are today Mrs. Gail Evans, Mr. Jeff Bridgman, who was sat on the table to my left. Also, there's Warrant Officer Rab Davis. If you want to approach him, feel free, because I don't. I'm scared. Rab is looking after our ceremonial, but he's there to help as well. They can be located on that side and there to help. Please now, may I ask that all mobiles be switched off and remain off at all times within the conference hall. And I'd like to hand back over to the band to play some more music before our guests come. Thank you, conference. This morning, our distinguished guest is the Deputy Chaplain-in-Chief Personnel, Reverend Dr. Group Captain Andrew Wakenham-Dawson of the Royal Air Force. He will be escorted to the platform by the President of the Association, Air Marshal Sir Baz North, and the Secretary-General, Mr Nick Bunting. Conference, will you now please rise to receive your guest?
We ask for God's blessing upon this conference. O God, for as much as without thee we are not able to please thee, mercifully grant that thy blessing may rest upon this conference, and may thy Holy Spirit in all things direct and rule the hearts and minds of the delegates here assembled, that their deliberations may be to the glory of thy great name and the good of all thy people. And this we ask through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Let us pray for the Royal Air Forces Association. O Lord God, King and ruler of all, bless, we beseech thee, the Royal Air Forces Association, and look with thy gracious favour upon all members thereof. Inspire them with thy Holy Spirit, and daily increase in them thy manifold gifts of grace. Direct them in their hopes and ideals, give them the spirit of comradeship, and teach them the joy that lies in helping others, that by their faithful service and fellowship they may ever promote thy glory and the welfare of all. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. The dedication of the Royal Air Forces Association. In friendship and in service to one another, we are pleased to keep alive the memory of those of all nations who died in the Royal Air Force and in the Air Forces of the Commonwealth. In thy name we give ourselves to this noble cause. Proudly and thankfully we will remember them. Amen. Standard bearers, inwards, turn. Standard bearers, quick, march.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for attending today, and also the huge participation that we've had for this weekend, which I think is certainly the largest I have seen for several years, just short of 470, I believe, which is clearly an indication of the popularity of the gathering and the social. I have to say, with 110 delegates currently in the room, some 12 delegates missing from those who registered, that's a little disappointing out of the 363 branches that we have. So less than 1/3 present today. However, I welcome you. We have some significant discussion to take place today with respect to the future development and shaping of our association in order to ensure that it is compliant with the needs of the service folk and the Royal Air Force family as we move forward to the future. So I ask you as delegates voting today, by all means one will have one's own personal view, but listen to the briefs and presentations, ask questions to amplify the areas of concern that you have, and vote thinking about the future of the association, as the Padre said, that we should be doing the right for our people across the piece, so that we are able to ensure that our association is fit, capable, and set to meet the needs of the Royal Air Force family for generations to come. Now, today we are also joined by the Controller of the Royal Air Force Benevolent Fund, Air Vice Marshal the Honourable David Murray. And that is key, as far as I'm concerned, building upon the success of Royal Air Force 100 appeal and the way in which the charities worked together across the Royal Air Force sector to ensure that not only did we celebrate and to commemorate what took place 100 years ago, but we reset our datums for the inspiration for the future. That's not just for the Air Cadets and for youth, but the future for our association and the future needs of the Royal Air Force family, which in the current economic campaign era in which we sit is clearly fraught with all sorts of issues that need to be resolved. Shrinking budgets within government circles means shrinking services being delivered out in the shires, and therefore greater need for the Royal Air Force family charities to work together to ensure that we do right by our own people and look after our people the way in which we ourselves would wish to be looked after. So, the tone of the business today is quite important, not just for the conduct of the meeting today, but also for the shaping of our association for the future. Those who are voting today, please do not take lightly your vote. You have the responsibility akin to that of the trustees of every branch and the trustees of the association in the round. The fiduciary responsibility to be looking after our charity into the future. That is a significant task, and please not to be taken lightly. So, I welcome healthy discussion, debate, challenge, and also a reflective thought when it comes to voting. Now, our patron sent messages to us, and you will be able to see the messages that have come from Buckingham Palace, from Clarence House, and from Windsor Castle with respect to greetings. And if I may, I'd like to read from our patron. Please convey my warm thanks to all the members of the Royal Air Forces Association for their loyal greetings sent on the occasion of their annual conference, which is being held from the 10th to the 12th of May at the Hilton Metropole Hotel, Birmingham. As patron of the association, I much value your continued support and, in return, send my best wishes to all concerned for a most memorable and enjoyable event. Elizabeth. From Clarence House, I thank you for your kind message of loyal greetings sent on behalf of the Royal Air Forces Association. I was delighted to receive these loyal greetings, and I send my warmest good wishes to you all, assembled in the Hilton Metropole Hotel, Birmingham, to mark the occasion of the annual conference from the 10th to the 12th of May 2019. Charles. And finally, I am most grateful for your kind message from everyone attending the Royal Air Force Association annual conference at the Hilton Metropole, Birmingham, from Friday the 10th to Sunday the 12th of May. Please tell them how much I appreciated their good wishes. I hope everyone will thoroughly enjoy the occasion. Past President, Philip. So, significant support there from our patron and past presidents. And if I may make one sales bid for all the gentlemen attending this evening's dinner, there are available RAF cummerbunds, which have just come on the market at £25 a pop next door. Right, on with the business, and I hand over to my erstwhile partner, Taff.
So I think before we start the business, we're going to remind you about the voting handsets that you should all pick up. There are still 12 branches in the room who haven't picked up their handsets. I can name shame later, but there are 12, and I have got the names because we can record them. But please, if you are in the room and you're a delegate, you ain't got one of these, you ain't going to be able to vote. So let's talk about the handset. The voting handset is the little white pad on the lanyard around your neck. If you rolled it round your neck like I've got it, and when you pick it up in front of you, you can't go wrong. You'll be the right way up and you'll be able to see the numbers. When we are due to vote, you'll see a voting icon in the top right corner of the big screen. Is it there? Yep, it's definitely there. To cast your vote, press the button that corresponds to the answer you wish to vote for. It's on the pad. We will be only using the top row, 1 to 3, for our votes. So press the button that corresponds to the answer you wish to vote for. When you press the button, an orange light will turn off and then on in that far left-hand corner just above the number 1. It will be quick. So don't worry, it'll come on and go straight off. Once it's gone off, the light will flash green once the system has accepted your vote. Once it's accepted your vote, the light will go out. The green light can take some time to get from your handset to the system and back, so please be patient. The system, please note, will only accept your first vote. Think and then act. So once you have voted, you cannot change your mind. In summary then, press the button on your handset to cast your vote. Light on handset will turn orange, then flash green when the vote has been accepted. Voting will close because it will go from green to grey in the top corner. The results will then be displayed on the screen and the repeaters. So, shall we have a practice? Mine doesn't work, so I'll leave it go. Okay, let's go. Remember, you can only vote when the green icon is on the screen. Question 1. In Royal Air Force slang, a Whopper is a scrummy chocolate bar, a Chinook, or the sound Pac-Man makes. Are we going to go green? We're going green, so please vote. I could do this, the sound, and dance, but no, better not. Come on, guys, it can't be that difficult. Even I can work it out. We get in there. So, test question 1. What was the answer? Oh. Oh. Really? I'm not allowed chocolate bars anymore, conference, anyway, so never mind. Okay, let's have a look at the next one. Last one. Oh. Oh. What is the main characteristic of the F35-B, otherwise known as Lightning II? Short takeoff and vertical landing, 2 propellers, it only comes in red, and none of the above. So we've sneaked an extra number in, but I think the top row might be obvious. Off you go, conference. We'll see what their aircraft recognition is like. I'm glad council are not answering this. I know this is taxing you so early in the morning.
This is the Royal Air Forces Association conference, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. Guys, the lights do, when I hear some sounds in the audio, the lights are quick when they come on. Once they hit, they come on and go off. Yeah, they don't stay on for long periods of time. Okay, I think we've all got it, so we'll move on. Mr. President, officers, council, delegates, guests, Taff Rees, Chairman of the ACC, presenting on behalf of the committee our report to Conference 2019. And may I also express a warm welcome to you all to this year's venue at the Hotel Hilton Metropole. The committee's formal report is printed on pages 29 of your conference programme. Para 14 of the report implies the acceptance of the order of conference business and the rules of procedure for conferences listed on pages 20 to 22 of the brochure. This year there will be a supplementary report to be presented to you after my initial report for your approval, which hopefully you've all picked up this morning on the way in. Delegates, once again, I'm not going to read through the report in detail, as hopefully we have all spent many hours reading the report and taking note of all the information provided. I will, however, take a few moments of your time to highlight a few points that we always need to be reminded of. Please note there are 16 resolutions this year. There are no daggered resolutions this year. However, there are 6 special resolutions that could affect the Royal Charter and the rules of the Association. These are marked by an asterisk in your brochure and will require a 2/3 majority to be carried. Again, anybody who hasn't picked up their voting handset, please go and do so now, because we'll be into the voting very soon. And if you don't pick them up, then you can't vote. Delegates, if you are expecting to speak on resolutions, please, I would ask you to take seats closer to the stage, which I have kindly reserved for you on my right, your left. And this will help speed up the process, and we will be able to see you, hopefully in these lights, to come across and speak. And also put your hands up early for the roving microphones. They are there for delegates if you have difficulty in getting to our rostrum. Please notify that you tell the tellers, as early as possible. Again, you might have noticed, the smart ones about you, there's only one rostrum on the stage again this year. When speaking on a resolution, so we'll go through all the rigmarole of telling us who you are, where you're from, please tell us whether you're speaking for or against the resolution during that introduction. Quick reminder about the use of RP5, Amendment of Agenda Resolutions. If there are to be any changes in wording as per the RP5, the IT staff and the ACC will need time to alter the slides on the screen. So there'll be a slight pause in proceedings, and I would ask for your patience during this process. I'm going to remind you again. Once again, at the rostrum, clearly state their name and branch, whether you're speaking for or against the resolution before you started, because I know conference would gladly interrupt you and make you start again. Please, again, say for or against. It makes our life a lot easier. Please be careful of the steps. There will be a member of staff floating around to look after you coming up the steps if need be. They are wide enough, but just take your time when you're coming up and going back off. Quick reminder for you delegates, guests and members, if you already reserved your place in workshops, we're providing Sunday morning after church service, and more importantly, if you want something to eat tonight, that you appended your name for the gala dinner. Conference. The annual conference is your committee. We represent you. The committee has been elected to arrange and manage conference on your behalf, and we do hope that you enjoy this 2019 annual conference. To this team, the team is effectively on duty the whole weekend, 24/7 I tell them, in case you need help. ACC members will be available in the auditorium at all times and at any time over the weekend. Finally, the committee hopes you have an enjoyable and productive conference. Mr Chairman, delegates, I move the adoption of the report of Annual Conference Committee for 2019.
Thank you, Taff. And I think we need to put into process the voting.
We do, Mr President.
So when we get the green button up, anytime you like. Ladies and gentlemen, over to you. Thank you very much. Taff, that's the first time you've ever scored 100% in any test.
Revenge is always served better cold, Mr President. Okay, Supplementary Report 1. I hope you've all picked up your supplementary reports on the way in. and it's a change to conference agenda as published in your brochure. I do apologise for the late amendment to the agenda, but to meet the printing timescales, we've got to get everything in, and we batched all the resolutions together. And hopefully now you've all picked up the revised agenda on booking in. So we reviewed the published agenda and now ensured that the resolutions are aligned with the respective presentations. Subsequently, we ask you to accept the new revised agenda. Mr Chairman, delegates, I move the adoption of Supplementary Report 1.
Thank you very much. And when we're ready. Over to you, ladies and gentlemen. I knew it wouldn't last long. Taff, thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, moving on with the agenda then, if I could welcome to the stage Phil Tagg to present the Financial and Auditors Report for 2018. Phil.
Good morning. The trustees in the form of council are responsible for ensuring that our financial activities comply with the Charities Act 2011, the Charity Accounts and Reports Regulations 2008, the Charities and Trustee Investment Scotland Act 2005, the Charities Accounts Scotland Regulations 2006, and the provisions of the Royal Charter. The association works to standard FRS 102, which is the main UK financial reporting standard and is a mandatory requirement for the association based on its size and the nature of its operations, and sets out how financial transactions are to be treated in the accounts and then how they're recorded in the financial statements. Providing specialist expertise to council are two subcommittees drawn from trustees and co-opted experts. The Finance Committee provides detailed oversight on all financial matters, and the Audit Committee provides oversight on issues which are deemed to be business critical issues. They could be finance, but could also be legal, HR, or operations. The Audit Committee flexes its approach to address what it considers to be the key risks of the time. Between council and the two subcommittees, our finances are subject to constant and rigorous examination. Further scrutiny is then applied by RSM UK LLP, the association's external auditors. I'm delighted to report that they have provided an unqualified opinion on our 2018 statutory accounts. This means that they are happy that the accounts are free from material misstatement. I'm also pleased to report that the 2018 annual accounts portray a positive result for the year, a surplus net income of £204,000 before movements to our pension scheme, which I'll explain in the following slides. In 2018, the main sources of income were fundraising campaigns, including community fundraising, particularly that undertaken by branches, and individual giving, together with gifts generously given in wills. Successful fundraising is critical to the sustained financial health of the association and our ability to provide support to the RAF family. The consolidated income raised from members, volunteers, the general public and investments was £15.6 million, an increase of 7.7%, which is £14.5 million in 2017. Income from fundraising and trading activities totalled 11.6 million for the year, and thanks to the branches, the annual Wings Appeal remains an important source of funding, raising 1.3 million, an increase of £16,000 from 2017. Investment income of 809,000 fell by 19.7% year on year, but was in line with expectations. Investment income was underpinned by robust investment performance in challenging market conditions, which saw the Association's investment portfolio outperform the benchmark and its charity peer group. In 2018, expenditure of £14.7 million was 614,000 above the 2017 level. Over £12.8 million supported our activities, providing friendship and welfare support. There were no significant changes to the nature of the charitable activities. RAF Limited, the Association's trading and publishing arm, made an operating profit in 2018 of £67,000. In 2017, there had been a loss of £76,000. The result of a significant business restructure during 2017, which resulted in an entire business relocation to Atlas House. There will therefore be a donation to the Association this year of £60,000. In line with charity best practice, the Association maintains unrestricted reserves, roughly equal to a full year's running costs. At the end of December 2018, consolidated general unrestricted reserves totalled £13.6 million. It was 12.4 in 2017, including charity assets of £10.6 million. Consolidated free reserves, that's net general reserves, at the end of 2018 totaled 6.3 million, which the Association is holding to fund 2019 operational expenditure of up to 12 months, and are therefore in line with the stated reserves policy. However, a prudent approach is being adopted to ensure that strategic transformation projects can be funded. Restricted reserves grew from 1.3 million in 2017 to 1.8 at the end of December. The Association continues to reinvest dividend income back into the portfolio, which amounted to 719,000 during 2018. In support of the 2030 direction, the Association has approved a number of designated funds. Funds have also been set aside for expenditure on one-off welfare grants to projects such as contact houses. A welfare fund of £1 million is to cover the growing but unquantifiable welfare demand. A homes review fund is allocated to take forward measures to improve the business operation of the respite break hotels, and a membership innovation fund is for development of measures to sustain membership. You may recall that during 2017, a new property fund of £5 million was created in recognition of the significant ongoing investment requirement in property assets. A prudent sum has also been set aside to cover unforeseen fluctuations in the value of holdings following Brexit, and to accommodate a natural correction following the increase in the portfolio. And an investment projects fund of £3.25 million to cover the development and re-engineering of core systems, as well as the achievement of long-term growth and sustainability through investment in people and infrastructure. We maintain a strong balance sheet, which continues to grow in strength. In 2018, it grew by £1.3 million. Unlike many organisations, our balance sheet is underpinned by real assets in the form of our investment portfolio, our property, which are our fixed assets, and cash, which are our current assets. The performance of the Association's investment portfolio, when compared with the charity sector peer group and the agreed benchmark, was strong by comparison during a very turbulent year. However, the Association's investment manager has been instructed to be ever more vigilant during a time of economic and political uncertainty. The Association's investment portfolio of £24.1 million reflects a reduction in market value of £1.7 million from 2017. The overall reduction stems from a very difficult year for the market and a year which saw a 12% reduction in the value of the FTSE. The deficit in the defined benefit pension scheme, 31st December 2018, has been calculated in accordance with FRS 102 regulations. The good news is the amount of the deficit has fallen from 1.6 million in 2017 to 256,000 at the end of 2018. As mentioned in previous years, we must be careful not to build our reserves up to a point which actually become a weakness, i.e., we don't want to give those who might support us the impression that we don't need their support. Once again, this could undermine our fundraising activity and in turn our ability to fund our welfare activities. This could even lead to questions from the Charity Commission regarding why we're not using our wealth to fund charitable objects. Achievement of the 2030 objectives set by Council will continue to require prudent financial investment. This will enable the association to grow while still maintaining healthy financial stability. You've heard how funds have been allocated to ensure the continued strategic investment of the association. Trustees have adopted a prudent long-term approach to financial management. This ensures the association has the financial agility to support core strategic objectives. For example, the size of the future welfare commitment is difficult to quantify, but is likely to rise because of recent intensive operations such as those in Afghanistan and the broader Middle East. From research undertaken in recent years, the association is aware of an increasing need among the younger generation, and with more and more serving personnel becoming members of the association, this need is likely to grow. Linked to this uncertainty is a continuing trend of cuts in social welfare budgets across the UK. There's also the risk associated with having a large value investment portfolio. The political uncertainty throughout the USA, China, the UK and mainland Europe has resulted in a high level of volatility in the financial markets, which could lead to a larger correction at any time. Taking all these factors into consideration, the trustees have adopted a financial management approach that gives the association the flexibility and the agility necessary to meet our objectives in an ever-changing world. My final point is to propose that RSM UK LLP are reappointed as our auditors, and will vote on this shortly. Thank you.
Phil, thank you very much indeed. And as Phil said, we'll be taking the vote on the auditors and the subsequent reports together later. But thank you very much indeed. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to invite to the speak John Cliff, our chairman, for the annual report for 2018. John.
Chairman, honoured guests, ladies and gentlemen, great to be back. You can't. You guys got the sound? Thank you. As I've done in previous years, I'll give you an update on our progress. I'd like to touch on some of the issues that have emerged over the last year. And I'm going to have to dispel more myths. For those of you who've been here over the last couple of years, you'll have heard me talking about myths. And I thought that having done it for 2 years on the trot, I would have killed them all off. No. You are very good at dreaming up new things. Some of it, I have to say, is total rubbish. But, as we will see, as I go through, there are more to kill off. But let me start with a bit of a reminder. We were told some years ago by our then president that there were 3 options facing us. We could carry on the way that we were, but that would see the association disappear. We were in terminal decline. We could consider becoming part of a larger charity, amalgamate possibly with the Benevolent Fund. or we could get off our backsides and do something and ensure that our association survived. Quite rightly, we accepted that doing nothing was not an option. We also accepted that we probably weren't in a very strong position, and therefore, had we tried to merge with another organisation, we would have been negotiating from a position of weakness, and we probably would have just been taken over. In other words, we would have disappeared. So I'm pleased to say we turned that down, and we chose to ensure our survival. That meant doing a lot of things differently. And I know I have put this slide up before, and I make no apologies for it, because the message does not seem to be getting through to a proportion of our members. You voted to ensure the survival of the association, and in doing that, you accepted that we were going to do a number of things differently. It means things will change, and I'll come back to that again. So what have we achieved? Well, I'd just like to mention RAF 100. What a fantastic year that was. I think the RAF did an absolutely wonderful job. And for anybody who saw the fly past, the crowds that gathered on the Mall, I'm sure you all had a lump in your throat. I certainly did. The engagement with the public was fantastic. But we ourselves as an association, we did great things. I was fortunate to go to a number of branch events that were celebrating RAF 100. We engaged with the public. And for any of you who were fortunate enough to go to the National Arboretum, the event we held there after last year's conference, I'm sure you thought that was a wonderful event. Now, the RAF's strapline for RAF 100, commemorate, celebrate, inspire, I thought was great. And we've done plenty of commemoration, an awful lot of celebration, perhaps for some of you too much. But the RAF is now focusing on inspire. It is thinking to the future. Who will be the people who take the RAF to RAF 200? We have to do the same. We must be looking forwards, not backwards. So, in terms of achievements, on the membership side, as I say, we were in terminal decline. And from a low of 58,000 by the end of last year, we had got the membership numbers up to 74,000. And it's still going up. If you take into account the members that we lose, it's inevitable. We're all at some point going to drop off the perch. We do have some members who don't renew their membership. We've actually generated nearly 34,000 new members over those 5 years. That's a huge effort. And to all of you who've recruited new members, thank you. But a large part of that effort is down to our membership team. But what we're now seeing is a changing shape, changing structure to the organisation. We're actually quite a new membership. And our age profile is changing. If we look at the membership profile in 2014, you can see we were very heavy at the right-hand end. Big gap in the middle, the sort of 46, the 45 through to 60-year-old age group. And that was because we had virtually stopped recruiting. 10, 20 years ago, we were hardly recruiting anybody. The profile now is beginning to level out. But, bearing in mind that some 40% now are under the age of 50, and that we have over 50% of the serving RAF are members of the association, we have to adapt to recognise the changing needs that comes with that changing profile. Our finances, we've just heard from the Treasurer. Yes, our finances remain healthy. There have been a few difficulties. The investments have moved over the last quarter in 2018. Everything's recovered, and our reserves have continued to increase. Slightly complicated graph, but if you look at the left-hand scale for our expenditure and income, over the last 5 years, a significant growth. The fact that we had allowed our expenditure on welfare to decline over many years, we have reversed that trend. But at the same time, we've seen a growth in our income. And our reserves are going up. We are in a very good position. As we've just heard, 87 pence in every pound goes on our membership welfare activities, our core activities. I'd like that to be 90%. But I don't know too many charities that ever achieve that. 87 pence in every pound going on our core activities is actually pretty good. But I do get these sorts of comments. That because we seem to have reasonable finances, why aren't you giving us all the dosh we're asking for? We've lost flexibility when it comes to funding. Well, I'm sorry, it's a myth. Flexibility, what people were referring to, I believe, is poor financial discipline. That's what we had. A lack of budgetary planning. We just made it up as we went along. And in some cases, we were actually using charity funds incorrectly. That's not good enough. We now plan. We have a strategy. It all starts from that, the strategy that's based on our vision. It cascades down. That is telling us what our long-term goals are. It's the why. What are we here for? What are we here to do? And then each year we have an operating plan. And in that, we're looking at the what is it we're going to do in year, how are we going to do it, and what resources do we need? And by resources, I mean people, and that ranges from our members, volunteers, the activities that they're doing, through to our employees. It also includes funding, a budget. And to that end, we plan. We run through, right the way through to our budgets, and we have a medium-term financial plan. Again, Phil's just touched on it. We're looking at how much money we are going to generate. We forecast. We actually look forwards a number of years. Where do we think that money is going to come from? What will we spend it on? And what are the risks? Not just in terms of risks to generating the money, but risks across the whole of the association. Where might we need to spend some additional money? What could go wrong? And that is being done on a 5-year rolling program. So we're constantly looking forwards 5 years. Anything else that you come up with, the bees or wheezers that come drifting in from a branch or an area saying, oh, we just thought of this and we'd like you to give us money to go and do it. No, I'm sorry, that wasn't in the plan. And therefore, we're going to have to find that money from somewhere else. Sure, things change, and we do accept, and that's why we do have a few contingencies. But if we allow ourselves to go back to just, oh, of course you can have the money. Yeah, here we go, throwing the money around. We will be back to having a financial problem. So please, plan ahead yourselves. Feed it up through the chain, and we can put it into our budget. Just because we're financially healthy does not mean that we can take our foot off the pedal in terms of fundraising. We have a whole raft of activities that bring in our funds, and that's good. We should have a diverse number of streams. Our Wings Appeal, fantastic event, and to all of the members and volunteers who go out and make our Wings Appeal happen, thank you. Can anybody tell me how much money we raise through the Wings Appeal? 1.2 million is on average. Is that gross or net? Gross. Do you know what the net figure is? You were at my chat yesterday, weren't you? Yes. It's about half of that. The reason being, of course, it costs all the bits that you give away. We have to buy that. But, don't get me wrong, it is still a significant amount of money. There is also a second order effect of our Wings Appeal, and that is the contact we have with the public, us getting out there. So, great part of our fundraising. Things like the hotels, they bring in some money. They don't completely wash their face, they're subsidised, but that generates some money. For some reason, this isn't working properly. Our trading subsidiaries, they bring in money. RAF, that's generating money that, albeit in a trading subsidiary, can actually come across any profits through to the organisation. We then have donations coming in. Legacies, significant part of our income now comes from legacies. We can tap into other trust funds and the like. And a whole range of events can be organised. Now, as I say, a lot of this is done by members, volunteers, by our branches holding events and so on. But a huge amount of it is undertaken by the team in our headquarters. We have a challenge in fundraising, and that is that, the links to the armed forces with the general public are getting smaller. We're a lot less visible than we used to be. We remain popular, absolutely, but this doesn't necessarily translate into people having the understanding of what the service needs are for our veterans' needs, or even the serving RAF family. And therefore, it's not translating into people being that willing to donate. They're still very, very generous. But what happens, and I thought I was going to be the only person who mentioned Brexit, but Phil beat me to it. I put that in there, the Brexit effect. If we get the gloom and doom that some are predicting, and post-Brexit we see a downturn in the economy, then people tighten their belts. They will not be able to donate, or not willing to donate as much as they did in the past. If the global economy takes a downturn, we could see a number of problems. Therefore, we need to be future-proofing against that. And research shows over past financial problems, global problems, those charities that have a strong fundraising team, they survive. They're the ones that come out of it all right. It's therefore vital that we maintain a strong team. And that is what your council has agreed to do, and we've invested in our fundraising team. Now, another little bit of a reminder to sort of recap. Our Royal Charter, it sets out what our objective is. It's what we're about. It's our constitution. It's why we're here. To promote, through the comradeship engendered by its members, the welfare by charitable means of all serving former members of the Air Forces. We actually replace that little bit, we abbreviate it, to the RAF family. But let me just pick out a few lines in there. Through the comradeship engendered by its members. A membership organisation. We allowed it to go into terminal decline. We have sorted that. Our membership is rising. It's still a bit of a struggle. We had hoped we'd hit 100,000 by 2020. That was perhaps a little bit too optimistic. But 100,000 is still the aim. And that is where we wish to get to as soon as possible. I'd like to see it go above that. But membership. So every one of you, get out there. Make sure you all recruit new members. By charitable means. So yes, we need our volunteers to do charitable work, but we also need charitable funding to make it happen. And as we've heard, our finances are in good shape. The welfare of the RAF family. The welfare piece, that is at the core of what we're about. So let me talk a bit about welfare. That is what we have set as a strategic objective, that we become a leading provider of welfare services to the RAF family, and that we're recognised for excellence. Provide support to the evolving wider RAF family. I've just talked about the changing profile in terms of membership. That is all part of this evolving RAF family. A little bit of a background then to the family. Made up of about, I don't know, I've heard numbers from 1 million to about 1.5 million. I've gone for a number somewhere in between. Today it's about 1.3 million make up the RAF family. Just about a third of ex-RAF people are living alone. And that does play to the national issue of isolation and loneliness. About 1 in 8 older people are living with some kind of unmet need. Now that's nationally. That will translate across into the RAF family. To actually get the money, and Phil touched on this, to raise enough money, to spend enough money to cover all of those gaps, it's going to be about another £6 billion a year. There's no way the government's going to find that. And so those needs are going to have to be picked up by the charities, by organisations like ours, organisations like the Benevolent Fund. And of course another hot topic in today's media, mental health. The RAF family is not immune from mental health issues. And all of that's translating into us seeing a 50% rise in welfare demands over the last few years. And that demand is not going to reduce, certainly not quickly. Yes, the RAF family will decline over the years, but that is not going to happen very quickly. So, we need to meet the changing demand. We need to understand what that demand is. We need to make sure that we gather the evidence. It's not a case of looking backwards, well, that's what we did, that's how we've always done it. No. What is the need today? What is it likely to be in the future? That is what we need to be dealing with. We need to increase support to the serving personnel. If we've got 50%, and it's growing, of the serving RAF as members, then we need to be relevant to them. We need to increase our volunteers. We need to provide the necessary training and oversight. It isn't just about making sure that we deliver the right thing to our beneficiaries. It's also about protecting those who deliver the welfare. We can't put them into very difficult positions without them having had the right training. And we must collaborate. We cannot do everything by ourselves. So we need to talk to sister charities. We need to work closely with the Benevolent Fund. We need to have links into SAFA, some of the less well-known organisations, the Alzheimer's Society and so on. We need to understand what is going on with them so that we can signpost, if needs be, our beneficiaries. A few bits on some of the themes in 2018 then on our welfare side. Improving mental well-being. First aid training. We have continued to roll that out. We've had a pilot programme where we've extended it to some of the RAF bases, so out to serving families. Reducing isolation. Whole number of activities. The befriending initiative continues to grow. The demand is there. We're having some issues in getting the right number of befrienders in the right areas, but we're working at that. It has been hugely successful. Things like drop-in centres. Early days, but hugely popular, the ones that we've got. Breakfast clubs. Branches and clubs. You know, you are at the heart of dealing with this problem, or you should be. You know, people forget that going to a branch or a club just to meet with friends, the comradeship aspect, that is absolutely at the centre of welfare. And if branches are doing their job properly, you'll be providing that network that picks up when somebody has a problem. Why hasn't Harry or Harriet turned up for the last few weeks? Then you'll be out there finding out why and hopefully picking up on the isolation piece. Back to being relevant to the serving RAF. Keeping the family strong and connected. Our contact houses, again, hugely successful. I think there was something like 22,000 visits to contact houses over the last year. Allowing families that might have been estranged, or even families that just are working apart, family lives in one place, serving member working somewhere else. It allows them a safe environment to come together and a relatively cheap environment. Really popular. Storybook wings. The free Wi-Fi activities that we put in on stations. Rolling it out to more stations, and hopefully we'll have it on all stations. Childminder training. Again, a bit of a win-win. We've provided some of the childminder training to partners of RAF families that allows them to gain a qualification in an activity that is much sought after on remote stations. Some of our other charitable outputs, I'm not going to go into it in any great detail, but our support of some of the minority sports in the Air Force. RAF referees, boxing, women's football, we've been able to provide some support to. The flying scholarships, you know, that's a wonderful scheme that we're supporting the Air Cadets, the future of the Air Force and future members of our organisation. And that link to the cadets in itself is something we should be really proud of and we should nurture. They do wonderful things for us, and we should do wonderful things for them. Information, another important area that we had to do something about. We need to have a single truth. When I first became involved on council, trying to find out a financial piece of information, trying to find out details on numbers of membership, numbers of branches, impossible. Everybody you spoke to gave you a different answer. Everywhere you looked, there were different figures. Why? Because we were operating multiple different databases, different IT systems. People use paperwork, files. Some of the information was just in people's heads. Not good enough. What we've had to do is manage the data we've got, and we've got tons of it. We've needed to cleanse what we've had, consolidate that data, and ensure that the new data coming in is coherent with everything else that we've got. At the same time, we've got to protect data. Now, I know we've got GDPR that's forcing a lot of bits and pieces upon us, which we perhaps wish weren't being forced upon us. But hang on a minute. I've just said we've got 50% of the serving RAF on our books. We've got their details. We do a huge amount of welfare delivery. All of that welfare information, it's sensitive. So regardless of GDPR and so on, absolutely we should be protecting that data. To do otherwise is bordering on criminally negligent. So, data protection is high on our agenda. By having sound IT systems in place, it also helps us to comply with lots of the other aspects of legislation and regulation. Fundraising activities, our finance activities, and so on. We need to have that coherent overview. And to that end, we've now got an IT system that is pulling together everything from our welfare activities, our fundraising, our financial management, our marketing. It's all becoming a coherent whole. We're continuing to roll it out, add further things in there. There will be more in terms of helping branches do their management activities. Hotel booking, RAF youth, we want to get that onto the system. But what it allows us is to have that understanding, that single truth. Who makes all of this happen? Yeah, you do. The branches, the members, our volunteers make a lot of it happen. But it's only some of it. We need to have professional employees. The whole information side of it. If I'm honest, when we started to upgrade the IT system, it was almost the gifted amateur approach to it. We did not have the right qualified people in place to deal with it. So we actually started off in the wrong direction. We corrected that pretty quickly, and we've now got a professional team. But what I get fed back to me is that council aren't considering the necessity for these people or the impact it's having on the reserves. Well, hang on a minute. I think I just said the reserves are still going up, so it's not having too much of an impact there. It is a myth. It's also insulting, because what that is saying is that I and my fellow trustees do not understand their roles and responsibilities. As Phil said, we have to comply with the Trustees Act, and there's a whole number of things that tells us we must do. Bottom bullet there, follow the law, act responsibly. That bottom bullet, make well-informed decisions. How do I make those well-informed decisions? Well, I go to the professionals. That's part of the team that I've got, working under the Secretary-General, who brief council, who ensure that we understand everything that we are dealing with. We make well-informed decisions. If the information that we need is not within our own team, we go outside and get the professional help from there. We make the right decisions for the right reasons. And just to carry on that theme, it is the trustees who are ultimately responsible for the management, the governance of the charity. They are the ones who are accountable. Not the headquarters, not the membership. It is the council. That's the law. So we are the ones who own all of our vision, our plans, our budget. It is the council. So please, another, I haven't written this down, another myth I keep hearing. It's that lot at Leicester. What are they doing to this association? It's them. No, it's the council. We manage things through our committees, and we have a whole range of them. The branch and membership, welfare, fundraising, information, and so on. They're headed up by a trustee, one of the members of council, apart from the audit committee, where we keep that aside. We then delegate the day-to-day management of those activities to the Secretary-General and his team. So if you've got a whinge, if you don't like the way things are going, it is not Secretary-General and his team who are at fault. It's the council. That's who you need to get to. We own all of the decisions. As I've just said, we're the ones who are accountable. We do have a feedback loop as well. We ensure that we are constantly monitoring performance against objectives. Every council meeting, we review this. The committees come back and report against that. They report against the risks that they see. And based on that, council review and, if needs be, take corrective actions. And that ensures that we stay pretty much on track. All the way back to those budgets, that financial planning that we do, cascades all the way out of our strategy. I've put this up before, I know, and I can see some of you thinking, oh, why is he doing this again? I'm doing it because the message clearly isn't getting through, based on some of the myths that I keep seeing. So emerging issues then, what's cropped up over the period? We need to be fit for the future. The chairman has touched on that in his opening remarks. So we need to ask some questions. Do we want to be good at what we do? Do we want to play to our strengths? Do we want to, in areas where we see that we're weak, improve? Do we want to have the public's confidence? Remember, these are the people who donate generously. If we lose their confidence, if we appear not to be abiding by the law, if we're breaking the rules, then our reputation goes down the drain. If you've got any doubts about the effect of that, have a chat to the chairman and chief executive of Oxfam. Or if you can find them, the chairman and chief exec of Kids Company. Okay, a large organisation like Oxfam, they've been able to survive. Huge amount of funds. An organisation like ours, we're just not big enough. If our reputation goes down the pan, we lose public's confidence, it's probably the end. Do we believe we've got a long-term future? Or are we just going to look backwards? I know. No, I certainly won't be, and I probably nobody in the room. There might be one or two lucky ones. We'll see RAF 200. But just because it's way off in the future, we shouldn't be ignoring it. We should be looking to this organisation that can do fantastic things, doing it for another 100 years. To be thinking less than that, I think, is pretty poor. So, if the answer is yes to all of those questions, we have to review, constantly review what the needs are. As I've just said, you know, we've got a changing profile, so we need to be aware of that, thinking about what it is that we should be doing, and therefore reviewing how we do it, the practices, the structures that we've got in place. We need to be continuously improving. We mustn't stand still. The organisation kind of stood still for a time. That's why we finished up. We stopped recruiting. We saw a reduction in our spending on welfare activities. But I'm back to this point again. We cannot avoid change. Just humour me for a few minutes. I started my flying career on these things, the Lightning. For a number of years, I got through to the Phantom, eventually the Tornado F3. And although I never flew it operationally, I managed to get my hands on the Typhoon. Top left-hand corner, probably the jet that could go out of all of those, the fastest and the highest. But it was pretty basic, very basic weapon system. Not a lot of fuel, couldn't stay airborne for a long time, leaked like a sieve, caught fire a lot. The Phantom, a much better radar, more missiles, more fuel, radar warning receiver. Tornado F3, computer. Now, when I say computer, far less computing capacity than any of you have got in your mobile phones, but it was the start of computers coming in. Defensive Aid Suite, data link coming in there. And Typhoon now, totally dependent on computers, data fusion, multi-role capability, amazing piece of kit. As you go round through my career, it was a constant update of technology. We were constantly looking to grasp the leading edge, if possible, of technology. I'm not saying the Lightning was, but in its day. And that, of course, goes with Trenchard's view, that we are technology. That's what we're about. And being at the leading edge, adapting, grasping it, adapting to it, and trying to be the best in everything we do. It was the ethos. It's what I spent my RAF career doing. So it was a bit of a shock when you come to RAF and you find it's full of, as the name implies, ex-RAF people, that we get the change. Oh, God, we don't do change. Oh, no. Oh, why? Why have we lost that ethos? No. Back to the point. We don't stand still. We must be looking to the future. So, some of the emerging issues on the welfare side. Going back to the sort of questions I was asking earlier. Is the structure as good as it could be? Is the rationale right? Does it provide the best services? Does it protect beneficiaries and our employees? When I'm trying to answer those questions, the first problem we came across is we hadn't actually done a root and branch review of our welfare delivery in over 30 years. Hang on, I think I said earlier on, it's one of our core activities. How can an organisation not review one of its core activities in over 30 years? Ridiculous. So, in 2018, we did a review. I do know that the structure is based on 1948 footprint. I do know that we've been struggling to cope with the rise in welfare demand, that 50% rise. Also, with increasingly complex legislation, regulation coming in, that's putting additional demands on us. So, in answering those 4 questions, I can honestly say it's all no. So what we have done, evidence-based review, looked at what the needs are, and we are now bringing in the right organisation for the right reasons. It means change, and for some of you, that will be difficult, but it's for the best. Hotels, another of our emerging issues. Another review was conducted. We hadn't gone for 30 years this time without a review, but it was requested based on a review that was done in 2013, where we knew there were problems beginning to emerge, and Council said we need to do another one within 5 years, and that's what we did. Also, the Benevolent Fund, who has been for a number of years 50-50 on Flowerdown and Rothbury in terms of ownership, they're looking to liquidate their involvement there. It's not a game changer for us at all, but it's timely, given that we conducted a review of our whole setup. It was chaired by Alan Opie, our senior serving member, and it looked at the current requirement, it looked at the future requirement, and how we best deliver that. What we came up with is that the service provided is excellent, and I don't think anybody will be surprised to hear that. Our employees at the hotels are brilliant. They do a fantastic job. The condition of the hotels is not bad, but there's always a but. The suitability varies. And by suitability, I mean suitability to meet care needs. Flowerdown and Rothbury are pretty good. I mean, Rothbury, it's a former hotel. It was built as a hotel. It's got wide corridors, the accessibility and so on is great. Unfortunately, Richard Peck just is it's no longer suitable. It's a whole range of accidents waiting to happen. And in fact, just to emphasise the point, as we'd made the decision that we were going to close Richard Peck, the lift broke. And we finished up with an elderly couple who were trapped. Fortunately not in the lift. They were stuck on the top floor because they were infirm for the best part of a week. Now, okay. It could have been a lot worse, but it just emphasised the problems that we've got. Now, we did look at, well, could we just spend money on it? Could we modify it? Now, it's an old Edwardian building. It is just not suitable to meet the current needs. So, the decision was taken to close Richard Peck, and we now need to look at alternatives. Having said we're closing Richard Peck, the Council did emphasise that we will continue to invest in Flowerdown and Rothbury. So it is just Richard Peck. Alternatives are being looked at. We need, in considering the alternatives, to take into account that the Benevolent Fund has their own setup, which we can use, the Princess Marina House. Could we look at transporting people from some areas to the existing hotels? Could we tap into a scheme again, such as the Benevolent Fund's pilot scheme of using the Warner Hotels? Something like that may be a route that we want to go down. This is work in progress. Branches and clubs, again, some issues emerging there. The condition of our properties. We've been through the fire risk assessments, we've been through the building surveys, and I know for some of you it was painful, but it was necessary. And what it's shown is that the condition of our properties varies. Some very good, some were dreadful, absolutely dreadful. Some of them were fire risks, and we can't have that. It also threw up that there were a number of legal things. We had health and safety failings. The use of properties, not always particularly clever. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be entrepreneurial if we've got the ability to use some of our properties to generate money, by all means, but we've got to do it properly, bearing in mind that if you, out at a branch, you sign a piece of paper, you agree to something, the use of that property, you are now liable. We've got a team in the headquarters that can help you do all of this. So, as I say, a number of issues got thrown up. But what I do hear is that actually all of this is just a ruse by the council and that lot at Leicester to close down all the branches and clubs and sell them off. Well, sorry, it's another silly myth, another pile of nonsense. If it were true, why, as you just heard from the Treasurer, why has council ring-fenced up to £5 million to deal with any of the issues that come out of the fire risk assessments and the building surveys? Why have we authorised a system for property grants? Is anybody here from Bedford? What's the got on there? You happy with what has happened? There you go, a branch that tapped into this system. It's available. Quite a few branches have made use of it. If that's because we want to close them down, okay, I can't follow the logic on that. And why have we agreed to an initiative to save our clubs? You'll hear more about this from the Secretary-General in a bit. It's an absolute myth that we're trying to close them down. We see our branches and clubs being at the base, it's at the core of what we're doing. But there are some issues on the finances. We're still getting branches that fail to provide accounts. It's against the law. We're still getting branches that hold excessive reserves. We still have, in some, not many, but still a few cases, inappropriate use of charity money. But we can spend our money how we want. Well, first of all, it's not your money. It's the charity's money, which can only be spent on charitable activities. And by charitable activities, I mean that are aligned to what our object is. So it's a myth. You should, as money comes in, spend it in a reasonable time period. What that's saying is you can't hoard money. So if you've got a turnover of £5,000 a year and we have some branches that are sitting on 100 grand or more, I'm sorry, you can't do that. And be warned, the charity commissions are starting to get wise to this. They're coming after you. You can spend your money, as I've said, on charitable activities. You can actually provide money to another charity. But that has to be a charity that is doing the same sort of things as we are. You can't give it to the RSPCA, an animal charity. That does not accord with the association's object. You can't give it to some church fund or whatever. It has to be an organisation that is doing pretty much the same as us. You can actually pay money to an organisation that isn't a charity. But again, that has to be to support your activities, your own charitable activities. So, for example, you may want to pay some money to a minibus company that's been providing transport for you on a event that's dealing with social isolation and so on. You may pay money to somebody who comes to speak at a lunchtime event because that is in support of your charitable object. But just paying it out willy-nilly to anybody else, be very, very careful. If you're in any doubt, talk to the team in the headquarters. And remember, everything has to be accounted for. So let me finish, as I'm just overrun. Tasks placed on council. And you'll be hearing more about all of this. Council was asked to look at the feasibility of the right for one member to have one vote. I emphasise, Council was asked. This wasn't them lot at Leicester. It wasn't Council that came up with this. You, the conference, asked us to go away and look at the feasibility of it. And as I say, you're going to hear more later. But I do emphasise what the chairman said at the beginning. There are pros and cons for going down the one member, one vote route. I'm sure that if you're a serving member, you're finding yourself detached overseas, it's very difficult to engage. So for you, the concept of one member, one vote, absolutely. That will ensure you're not disenfranchised. The fact that we've only got just over 100 of our branches represented here, only about a third of them with delegates, you go, well, how's that providing coverage for all of our members? Are they disenfranchised? So that might be a very good reason for going down the route. There'll be others of you who may say, well, what's the impact going to be on conference that we know and love? So, as I say, pros and cons. So please do listen carefully and think hard when that comes up. The other one we were asked to look at was becoming a single charity. And again, I emphasise, we were asked. The number of times I've heard, you, council, you, that lot at Leicester, you're doing this. No, we're not doing it at all. We have been asked to look at the feasibility. This, I believe, has come out because of the myriad of legislation, regulation that is cascading down onto branches because you're all micro-charities. And therefore, the officers of that branch are trustees. You have the legal responsibilities of trustees. And I believe that that burden is getting too high for many. I understand that. Therefore, if we could get rid of that through the single charity route, fine. And that, I believe, is behind this being put forward. But at the moment, we've been asked to look at the feasibility. We are not making any of this happen. We're just looking at the feasibility. Again, you will hopefully get more of that later. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope I put across that we are ensuring our survival. We are continuing to rejuvenate. We are planning for the future. I believe this organisation has fantastic potential. It does wonderful things now. It can continue doing that. I believe it has more to offer. But that means we must look forwards. We must step into that future confidently and well prepared for it. Thank you.
John, thank you very much indeed for yet again an articulate, measured and clear report. And I can see people queuing up for cryogenic storage to see RAF 200. When somebody actually gets there, I won't be in that queue, so don't worry. Ladies and gentlemen, if I may, I'd now like to invite our Secretary General, Nick Bunting, to the stage to give his presentation on the... Are you shaking your head, Tuff? Am I doing something wrong? The reason Tuff is shaking his head, he just wants to tell me that the 12 delegates who were still in bed when we started have now got out of bed and have picked up their voting sets. So we're up to 122. So, Nick, if you please come to the stage and present on 2018 and the future. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Birmingham. I'm going to give you a shortened version of my presentation, as obviously the annual conference committee thought I needed less time than last year, so you'll all be very pleased about that, I'm sure. I would like, though, to start with some information on how the public see us, and it really backs up some of the points the Chairman has made in terms of why we're here. And I'll just touch again, on the charitable charter and the vision and mission of the organisation. And how do the public see us now? And you'll be aware of the changes that we've made to our presentation format, our logo, working with PR companies, working with regional media, both radio and local press, and how that has affected the awareness of the association amongst the general public. And I think it's really pleasing to see that we are in a solid position in this band of military charities that are all part of the COBSIO organisation, and we come together to use the NFP synergy data. So I think the work that everybody, the branches and the team have done in terms of really focusing on trying to raise the awareness of the association has paid off. And I don't think I can use the term anymore that we're probably the best kept secret in the RAF family, as I did when I first joined. So thank you all for your contribution to this work, and we'll continue to monitor this to make sure that our awareness stays there. We also asked them at the same time to look at another question that the Chair also touched on, which is how many people that served in the RAF do you know or have met from the survey group? And I think, again, this is quite telling in terms of our thinking for the future and where we sit as an organisation in the minds of the public, and how fundraising, welfare and recruitment will come on as we move forward, when we see that 78% of those that were surveyed didn't know anybody and had no experience of the RAF. And this is a key element in terms of our thinking and how we start to plan for the future. If I can start with membership and run through a few of the facts there that the Chairman's already touched on, but I just wanted to reinforce some of the issues that we were facing when I joined the association are still here today. Broadly speaking, then and now, we lose about 10,000 members every 3 years through lapsing and passing away. And this will continue at least for the next 20 years when you look at the demographics of the age groups, and I'll talk more about that. Recruiting, we've recruited more people than are currently serving in the Air Force. So think about that. Since 2014, we've recruited almost 34,000 people. There's just over 31,000 people in the Air Force. So that's a fantastic achievement that everybody in this room has contributed to. So again, thank you for that. But do understand, we will not be taking the pressure off the membership recruitment wheel because of that fundamental issue that we lose about 10,000 people every 3 years. And that means, contextually, we have to recruit 2 people to stand still and grow. If we don't keep recruiting 2 people for every 1 we lose, we will be going backwards. And that's an important message, I think, that we need to take back to our branches. Because I would ask everybody again, as I did last year, if every member could recruit 1 member, please, that will significantly change the membership scale and size of the association. And those issues stay the same. Generational, members not recruiting members, branch club closures often leads to people lapsing because they're losing that comradeship. So we need to think about what we do and the implications there and where that fits into the future. There is still in some quarters a perception of the association that it's only for old men and it's only for drinking clubs. And again, we need to make sure we change that and we welcome everybody into a branch or a branch club, and that they don't have the experience that I had recently, walking into a branch club with my wife, walking to the bar, ordering a drink, going to a table, sitting down, drinking the drink, finishing our drinks and walking out again. Nobody spoke to us. Not one person came over and asked who we were. If that's how we welcome people into our branch clubs, they're not going to survive. There's also the constant myth, I think, around, well, you're just diluting the membership, the RAF ethos, Nick, with all these new members because they're associates. Well, we're not. We need associate members. They're an important part of what we're doing. And you'll see later how important they are in terms of running branches And in many cases, they are the stalwart of the branch. They are supporting the veteran and the community that they're in. But we're still 82% either serving or veteran community. And in fact, the serving community as a proportion of the association, probably by the end of 2019, will be the largest subsection of our membership. So we are changing the way in which we're going. And this is a long-term plan. This is not a plan for this year, next year. This is a generational plan, because we need to recruit people in the RAF when they join. So they're throughout their whole service, they stay with us, and we are relevant to them, we're responsive to them, and we respect them in their different needs. We cannot expect new serving members to become a member of the committee or attend clubs and branches today. That's a downstream job. And if we'd have continued to have our recruitment going across the years, we would have seen this happen. Although we're over 50% of the serving membership, we've still got a way to go to get into the middle grounds of the age groups. And let me explain why that's important. The chairman touched on this. Blue is 2014, red is 2018. It's great. The growth in the red is great, isn't it? But look in the middle there at 41 to 45. In 15 years' time, this will have all moved to the right. So let's think about the people on the right-hand side of the graph. What will have happened to that national service generation, that World War II generation? The people who are the stalwarts of the branches today. They might not be here. I'm hoping many of you will, but you might not be here in 15 years' time. But those who are in the 41 to 45 age group now will be in the 60 to 65 age group, those people that we would really be looking to be taking on the mantle in our branches, to be stepping forward and helping us deliver our welfare and our branch activity. And yet, what's the smallest part of our membership? So when we look forward and we talk about recruitment and we talk about how we start to think about who we recruit and why we're recruiting these people, we really need to think this long-term game. Because if we don't think the long-term game, we're going to get to a point where we've got lots of people coming on the conveyor belt, but the tip of the conveyor belt is tiny. And that will affect the construct of the association in 15 to 20 years' time. So there's lots of work to do now that we need to think about for the future. This isn't just about today. This is about the long-term future of our branches and our welfare programme. And we need to make sure we're recruiting people that are filling these gaps at the bottom, which is a direct result of us stopping recruitment in the late 90s, early noughties. So think 20 years ago, guess where the people in those age groups were? They were right on the left-hand side of this chart. So we really need to think about what we're doing in recruitment and continue to focus in those middle-aged groups. But again, don't be upset if they're not coming into the branches today. We've got to ensure that we communicate with them in a way in which means they want to come and enjoy things with us. And I talked yesterday in one of my presentations about making your branch meetings fun and enjoyable. Let's not just have a branch meeting that's an agenda and you tick off the agenda and go through it. Because quite frankly, I get bored going to them and I'm the invited guest. What would a young person think for that? Make it an enjoyable evening, an enjoyable event. Because we need to keep those people if downstream and in the future we really want to have the branch network that we have today. Because when we look forward to 2025 and the Reds 2025, we'll still have a dip. Even in that sort of 5 to 10 year period, and this forecast is based on the last 2 years' recruitment, lapsing, and those sadly who've passed away. So we're not going to fill that hole for a long time, and we need to keep working hard on that. Because sadly, this is what we're seeing in terms of branches. And if you remember in 2016, I talked about the importance of everybody thinking about succession planning, about trying to engage with the broader membership of your branch then, because I was very concerned that first quarter 2019, i.e. after the RF 100, the puff, the enthusiasm, the momentum would go out of many branches and we would start to see this decline increase faster. And I can tell you year to date, we've had 16 branches close. And some of those have been quite abrupt. Branches and branch club committees resigning en masse and walking away. And just leaving the club, the steward, can you fix it please? So we do really need to understand what's happening and how we can work with you to make sure that this escalation doesn't carry on. It's really important we start to focus on this. So I'd like to talk about branch clubs. And the chairman touched on this as an area that we want to really think about. We've also done some research on what does the public think our clubs are for. It's quite interesting, I think, and quite informative. The first thing that they thought our clubs were about providing a safe space for veterans, about supporting the association, about supporting our welfare work. There's a lot in between to enjoy lunch and dinner to the bottom one. And the bottom one was to go drinking. And yet a number of our clubs, that's the other way around, isn't it? It's not really a safe space for veterans because it's full of people going there to drinking dens. And we still have them and we're still working hard on them. So we do need to think about what it is we're trying to deliver with our 83 branch clubs and the output that we're looking at there. And you'll go, well, that's just young people, isn't it? No, or it's just old. It's actually, when you look across the age demographics, it's every age group are saying the same things. And in fact, interestingly, the older veterans feel that it should be a safe space for them, not really necessarily drinking. So it's quite interesting how the perception of what it is versus the reality. Can I just ask you quickly to read this statement? Does that sound familiar to you? Can I ask you to read it again? We made that statement in 1993, and yet we as an organisation didn't really follow through. In 94, we actually said this: if only we'd done it then. If only we'd done what we said we would do in 93 and 94, where might we be today? What we see, though, is a mixed economy in our clubs. Some of them are not compliant in a number of areas, and particularly around employment. I can say that saying the steward who comes in every day is self-employed, they're not. They work in the club every day of the week, and you're their employer and you pay them, they're not self-employed. You can't avoid that. There's lots of myths out there about what's happening with the staff. Yes, there are committed but non-professional volunteers running many of these branches. And don't get me wrong, there are some fantastic ones. I think Percy was quoted earlier at Bedford. Some great branches, and I think we've got Cleethorpes over there, great branches. But there are a lot that are not, a lot that are really struggling. And what we're seeing is they just do not respond to what's happening around them. And by that, they're dying on their feet. And their liabilities are getting to the point where we're seeing people just walk away. Just walk away from it and leave it. Because they're trading insolvently. Or the branch has run out of money because it's been propping up the branch club, using charity funds incorrectly. And we've got to stop that. We've got to move forward. What we're also seeing is not open to the community, whether that's the RAF community, the wider military community, or the community in which they reside. And these are all issues that we've got to face and start to address. So we did some more research on behalf of council, and we got the accounts from 61 clubs. 27 were operating at a loss. So almost 50% were operating at a loss. That doesn't bode well, does it? Where are they funding that from? Charitable monies from the branches, probably. We also found a huge salary cost. 1.3 million salary. There's over 100 people employed in our clubs, and yet we're only turning over 83,000 per club. So another club that I visited while I was doing the area conferences. I arrived at midday, knocked on the door, they were closed. The steward opened the door in their pyjamas. What was their engagement with their community? How were they working with the RAF family and the military family in their community? Well, quite frankly, they weren't. And I think we need to really think about what is the guidance, direction and action we're doing. Because if we don't do something, we're actually going to get to a really difficult position of not having too many of these left. We also found that they weren't paying much in rents. Now, recognising there's 83 buildings here, how much do we think those 83 buildings are worth? Let's say 50 million. So if you gave me 50 million to put on deposit, would you be happy with £126,000 back? I think not. I think you'd be questioning what we're doing and our competence. And yet we're very happy for our clubs to utilise this mass of charity assets for very little return. And that would be okay if we were delivering the objects of the association, that comradeship, that community, that welfare activity. They also delivered this tiny margin, £67,000. We had some industry people look at this for us, and they suggested if you were running them properly, that should be about 1.5 million. So in just 61 of them, where's that £2 million? Where's it gone? £2 million that could have been used for charitable activity. So the proposition we put to council is, should we do what we said we would do in 93 and 94, or should we just continue to let the branch clubs drift and decline to the point they close? And I don't know what you feel, but I've got a clear view on this, and I'd like to know what conference's view is. Do you think we should do nothing and just carry on letting the clubs drift away? Are you content with that? No. And council weren't either, I'm sure you'd be pleased to know. And they've asked us to look at doing some things. So we looked at some options to start with. Well, we could do nothing. Everybody says no. We could do nothing but maintain the buildings. It's an interesting one. We'll end up with some assets in the future which the charity can use. Is that a good or a bad thing? I'm not sure. Is that maybe selling off the family jewellery? Not sure. But certainly what we would see is a steady reduction in branch clubs. How many would be left in 5 years' time? Well, our worst case estimate was we'd be left single figures. Those really good clubs that we could all identify now will probably be the ones left. Is that what we want? As the chairman has talked about, and the treasurer, we've had to designate 5 million of the corporate charities funds to support these buildings. And we've had to talk to the Charity Commission about that, because that's use of the corporate charities money to support other charities' activities. And that's a significant amount of money. And as we keep closing branch clubs, we'll lose comradeship, we'll lose branches, we'll lose members. It's a vicious circle, isn't it? And that's all about the insanity of doing nothing. So, we suggested that we did something. You've agreed. I have to say all the area conferences have agreed. Council's agreed that we need to intervene. So this is no longer an arm's reach. This will be an active approach from the association in the second half of this year going forward to start to work with you and help. And our working approach, and we want to do some more on this to develop it, and we will be engaging, particularly with the good clubs, about how we deliver this. And our working approach is at 3 general sorts of branch club. The internal tenant, we've called it, is the really good branch club committee and branch committee that are working hand in glove to further the aims of the association and are delivering a great experience. We want to provide them with a safety net, because we know every branch probably relies on 2 or 3 key people. And if they get hit by a bus, actually the branch and branch club will stutter and may fall over. We want to be there to support them. We've then talked about an external tenant, a branch club that might have the potential to survive, but we're not sure. How much do we invest in that where we're not sure it's got the potential to survive? What will we do there? How will we test the water without too much financial exposure to the charity? And then the third one is, it's clearly got the potential, but the branch club committee and the branch committee no longer have the capacity to support it. How can we then step in and help directly? And that's like a managed solution. So we're looking at different options. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's how do we look at the different solutions that will help us to maintain as many of the branch clubs as possible in the best possible way without draining the resources of the association. So the council have decided that we should do this through a subsidiary company called RAF Clubs. Does what it says on the tin. Now we need to do that because RAF Clubs are non-primary purpose trading, i.e. they're not charitable. So we need to ring fence the risk and make sure we clearly separate non-charity activity from the charity activity. And although we can deliver charitable outputs through our clubs, the Charity Commission and Oscar are really clear they're not charitable in their basic stuff. So we then need to employ some industry specialists, because I'm not a pub specialist, I'm not a club specialist, but we do know people who are, and we're working with them to develop a plan. But we have to do something today. So Doncaster, the branch committee left the keys and the checkbooks with the steward and walked away. What do? Do we leave them? Do we say, that's okay, carry on steward, we'll supervise from a distance, or do we intervene? If we don't intervene, and as you'll see throughout the rest of my presentation, we have a reputational problem. We've got to intervene. We've got another branch that is just in the process of walking away, and we're trying to put the brakes on it. We've got another 2 that want to give us their building that they've told us about in the last 2 days. There's a lot of pressure on the volunteer here, so we need to act now if we're going to try and save some of these for the future. Charity Commission are also clear that it's got to be a proportionate investment, and we have to be very careful about it. It has to be underwritten by any sales of those properties and any surpluses that are made for us to use the charity's money to try and preserve these clubs for the future. And we're going to use this from within the £5 million that Council have already allocated to the club's building programme. We're going to use that fund to fund this activity. And it's really important that you remember that branch clubs are not charitable. They're not primary purpose. They're not charitable. And the Charity Commission are really clear with us on this, and they will be watching what we're doing. But what's our intent overall? Our intent overall is to keep as many going as possible. We don't know how many that will be, but we'd like to think it's more than 50 still survive out there that provide us with that local community activity. Clearly, we want to produce a safe space for veterans and to make sure that the ethos is the RAF family and it is for the RAF family, and they're not just drinking dens for the local community who have gradually eroded the RAF element over time. We would like them to be open to the veteran community in particular 7 days a week, and we would like us to engage with other military charities in their communities and provide them with a venue. We'd certainly like to address some of the loneliness and isolation issues that we see through driving every one of them to be starting to think about running a branch and a lunch club. Because everyone should be doing that now. There's no reason why our branch clubs shouldn't be offering this. It just might be that the volunteers who are there today don't have the capacity. They need to be bright, vibrant and welcoming places, not ones that the carpet's not just sticky, it's gone glossy because it's not been changed and it's that old. A bar where you don't get told to move because that's Billy's spot, he stands there. Well, where is he then? He's not here today, but you can't stand there. Or one where you walk in and nobody talks to you. We've got to engage with our own community and the veteran community, and in many ways the local community in which they live, because we will not keep that support going if we don't engage. And of course the key thing is to support our welfare services. And in fact, I've had a conversation last week with a branch about their club, and I actually said, do you need to serve beer? If you took the beer part away, you'd have a building that you could use for the community. Why don't we look at that? We need to think about different ways of utilising these buildings and these facilities to support our welfare services. And I suppose really importantly, we need to take the load off the volunteer. We really need to support you, the members, who are the active ones, who are trying desperately to conform with everything that's going off, with all the regulation, legislation and everything else. We still want you part of this process, but we recognise now we've got to step forward and do something. I just want to move on to welfare. And I'm going to back up some of the comments you had from the chairman. Wi-Fi now, I think, is part of Maslow's theory, isn't it? You know, you can't go without fire, food and Wi-Fi. Isn't that right? Well, certainly if you're my children, and probably all of your children stroke grandchildren, You never see them without some form of electronic device attached to them. Well, I'm really, really pleased to say now that the work that we've been doing, we're getting about 120,000 people a year now log on to the Wi-Fi services that we're providing. And the other thing that we've extended this year is to put Wi-Fi into the contact houses so that when those families go there, they're not isolated from the technology, their mates at home or whatever. So it's not just that double disruption, there's the ability to cope with that and work there. We've run a very successful pilot in 2018 on childminding that the Chairman again talked about, and we've now launched a number of courses, I'd have to say are all heavily oversubscribed, and we will be looking to find some more funding to fulfil the demand that's quite evident from the serving communities partners. And those contact houses were used by just under 23,000 people, and that's bed nights. 23,000 bed nights in those contact houses. Another 560 plus people had a storybook wing to them. They can now download it, it can be sent to them, but we've had to come up with some things around it. There's a little medal and a box, it's not just a download. We've also started Doodle Boxes, which was a trial last year, which is a memory box, which is something that the children can colour in. There's pillowcases and other things in there they can colour in and send memories from home to their parent who's on deployment, detachment or long-term training. And in most cases, that's what you see in there, colouring things from the children. Although we were told on Thursday, of course, that one arrived with a bottle of gin in it. So we've also been piloting a mental first aid process for the families of the serving. And again, this has been very well received. And we're now working with 22 Group and with HQ Air of how we develop this into a much more specific RAF approach. At their request, we're working with them to see how we can drive this forward in the half-day version. The full-day, two-day version is very intense. It's very, very full-on course. But we've got a number of those that are both planned at the pilot stations where we've tested it and further stations as well. Chris is not with us today, but Chris again has been doing a fantastic job on the Armed Forces Compensation Scheme. And the top number is really interesting because we're now starting to see a number of people talk to us while they're serving. But I would like to just do a shout out for Chris, even though he's not here, but he might be watching on the streaming, because Chris has just secured his first £1 million payout. And I think we should really congratulate him for all the hard work he's done. The Families Federation, again part of the association, co-funded by the Benevolent Fund, really important part of the overall picture of information that we provide to the Air Force and to ministers in terms of activities and actions that's there. And as you see, there's a wide variety of issues that the team have done. And Maria has recently joined us and has really reinvigorated the team and is doing a fantastic job and has already gained the respect of the SLT in the RAF. Moving on a little bit more onto casework areas. We've now got 474 at the end of 2018. And as you know, we've been working hard to recruit people. And we have quite a stringent process where you're interviewed, you're DBS checked and you're trained. But that conveyor belt now is starting to work quite effectively. And on average, every week, we turn out 10 trained caseworkers or befrienders now every week. And remember, that's the end of a 3-month process. So there's quite a lot of work that's done at the back end to make sure that happens. We supported over 85,000 beneficiaries, but I think it's also important to recognise that only 2,000 of those required financial assistance. And we're now, the Benevolent Fund are now referring to us almost half of all of their cases, for which I thank them. And I'd also like to thank David and the team there for their support in enabling us to harmonise just over £3 million of the Benevolent Fund's money in these cases. So I'd like you to please thank the Benevolent Fund for their work and generosity. What we've also done, though, is because I keep asking, how do we know our investment's working? How do we know that the actions that you're doing is making a difference? So we've looked at a number of clinical scales and measures to identify whether or not what we do has an impact. And we've adopted the Warwick and Edinburgh model. I won't try and pronounce the short bit, which is basically a scale used by the NHS to measure at the start of a case, the middle and the end, to see if we've done anything that's changed the mental health and well-being of the beneficiary that we've been working with. And this is being used by the NHS, it's used by other specialist charities and military charities to measure the impact of what we're doing in the welfare side. So we can now start to empirically say whether or not what we're doing has an impact. And as you know, we train all of our volunteers to a nationally accredited standard, and I'm pleased and slightly surprised to be able to say that yet again we're the only military charity that trains both our employees and our volunteers to that sort of standard. Befriending, really important in terms of that isolation and loneliness agenda. And of our almost 500 befrienders that we had at the end of 2018, I'm really pleased to be able to say a quarter of them came from the serving personnel. And I was with a serving person on Thursday who looks after a 97-year-old veteran who they've taken their family, their children to meet him, and it's the highlight of their week. But I also suspect it's the only time they talk to anybody is when that person goes to see them. I think we need to really understand that 1 in 8 elderly people who live alone and how isolated they're becoming, particularly when they live in rural areas and they don't have transport. We've got 520 befriendees looked after by those, and there is a waiting list for befrienders, which is why getting them out the conveyor belt is so important. We've touched about breakfast and lunch clubs in our branches and clubs, and they're a really important way that you can work with it. And I know there's a number of successful ones in the room, but we really do need more. And the Preston Wing Centre is still a model that we are using to demonstrate how engaging with the RAF community, the wider military community and the wider community works in terms of the support and activity that we get. And if anybody wants to know more about that, then please talk to Rory and his team, because they'll give you the facts around what we're doing there. So just to summarise, we are seeing that continued demand for soft welfare, that continued demand for that non-financial welfare activity. And we have seen almost 50% growth in our welfare activities, mostly driven by that soft welfare activities. More and more people are coming to us on that loneliness, isolation, and now on the mental health agendas. And these are all changing things that we need to respond to and be responsive to as we see the developments that happen there. What we're also doing is making sure that what we have in place is evidence-led. You heard the chairman talk about it. Council have been very strict with me in terms of we don't get decisions through unless it's a fully supported options-based case, which is needs-led. And we're providing lots of information to council to evidence why we think something is a really good idea. And as a result of that, we've set up a research advisory group. I won't read it or go through it, but you will see the number of professors, doctors and etc. in there that are checking when we put our numbers together and put our numbers out that they're absolutely right. We're also getting almost to the point of publication of our characteristics survey, and we'll be looking to do this formally in some sort of research symposium later in the year, because we need to understand the characteristics of the RAF family much better so that we can think about how we shape our welfare services as we move forward, because the welfare that's needed of today and tomorrow's veteran and serving person will be different to today's and yesterday's. And these two keep coming up time and time again. Mental health and loneliness are the two big topics that keep coming up when we do research and we go out and talk to the public about what they see as the issues and what we see from our beneficiaries. So as a consequence of that, and again the chairman touched on it, we are working with some other organisations. And the LIFE model is basically an agile approach to coming up with solutions to current problems. And we're working very closely with the Alzheimer's Society to develop some new products and services that will help us deal with those people who are caring for people with dementia. Because what has been one of the interesting early outputs from the characteristics survey is we expected to see serving personnel have a caring responsibility. And we assumed that would be for children. And we all know what assumption does. Because when we delved into it a bit, actually, it's mostly for an elderly or sibling. And that the child care bit is an element of, but more and more people are having to look after older people or other family members that have got issues and they need to care for them. So the caring needs of the serving aren't what we had expected, because we'd expected children, but not. And that's why we've partnered with the Alzheimer's Society to come up with some solutions to the findings that are coming out of the characteristics survey. We're also working with Nottingham University on a programme, and there's two big academic titles there. To you and me, it's storytelling. And it's some work that's been done in an academic setting initially to develop work for the blue light services around how they use storytelling to deal with mental health issues. And there's big titles around it, and there's lots of academic research behind it, but it's actually how can we help people through putting in an environment where they can simply have a structured conversation about the issues they face. And I think when we get to the end of this point, it'll be really fascinating to see what comes out of this journey. We're also working with Air Office of Scotland and Edinburgh University about a number of issues around what's the RAF community look like in Scotland, where are they, what's happening. When you think the only station now is Lossiemouth and there are 2 reserve squadrons, probably the biggest light blue community in Scotland is the Air Cadets. I'll just touch on finance and governance a bit, just to feed some more information in. I know the chairman's stolen most of my sandwiches earlier, but ever thus. Just to reinforce a couple of the points that were made, what's happened to our balance sheet, in a sense, over the last 5 years? Well, we've almost doubled our income. We've almost doubled our expenditure. We've almost increased our income by 3/4. And we've increased our reserves by 1/3 in that time. And we've invested more and more and more into delivering for you, the members and our beneficiaries. And I think it's important that we continue to recognise this growth and we keep delivering. So when you see us do things, it's with a clear plan. And this is the graphical version of what we give to the Finance Committee. And this is the original version of the MTFP that we developed now almost 2 years ago. That was a number of assumptions were agreed with the Finance and Investment Committee. This was presented to Council as some options. If we did nothing, what would happen in terms of the use of our reserves? Where would we be? And the blue line would show that we would gradually eat into our reserves over time unless we did something. So we talked about, well, what could we do to address some of that? That's the orange line. And if we do really, really well, and all the assumptions come together in a perfect world, and Brexit doesn't ruin the economy, then you'll see the orange line go up. So immediately Rory got in and said, no, I'd like to spend some of that, please, on the welfare, and that's the dotted line you see on the original model. And this is our starting point for all the other work we do. So each time we look at bringing forward initiatives or programmes, we look at how that would impact on the medium-term financial plan. So it's not just goes through the relevant committee, but the Finance Committee also look at the financial consequences in the medium term of the stuff that we do. And here is another version of that with some other activity highlighted within it. But we do still face some structural challenges. So I asked Dal and the membership team and the area directors to give me an honest forecast of where they thought we would be. And was my prediction that I made in 2016 about 2019 going to be right? And sadly, it looks like, if this comes to pass, we'll lose 50 branches this year. If we do nothing, we're likely to lose 50 branches. And if we do nothing, we're likely to lose 29 clubs. So all of our planning and thinking and our interventions have to be built around some forecasting. No longer are we salami slicing the next week, month, 3-month quarter, as we used to do, or looking backwards 30 years. We've really got to think about what we do going forward and how that works. So the chairman talked about change. Change is ever constant. Some of this is potentially bad change, but we need to do things to try and intervene to keep some of this going. Recognising we will not keep every branch alive, but the area directors and Dal and the team are working hard to make sure they can shore up as many of these and support them. Because the key thing is on the right-hand side, if we don't do that, that will affect about 9,500 members. That's a big chunk of our membership. We really need to think about how we work with this and respond. And this is all about thinking forward and what can we do to support and help, not looking backwards. This is about how do we work forward as we go on to that 2030 destination. And this is really important for us in terms of what we do. We have one name. We have 363 branches. We have 74,000 members, but we only have one reputation. The Chairman touched on KidsCo, think President's Club. You know, we talked about the Age UK issues. Reputation is really hard earned and easily lost. And any one of those parts there can lose us our reputation. And if we badly lose our reputation, it will affect the association and what we're trying to do. And it is about reputation. Almost everything we start with as a strategic risk comes out of reputation. So just looking forward as to some of the challenges that I see for us as the team to support council and to you, is we need to move away from the anecdotal and experiential to the informed approach. It's no longer any good, and I've said this before, because we've always done it that way, we need to keep doing it, all of that. We need to properly understand the impact on the organisation of what we're doing, and we need to move away from inputs through to outcomes. And I know we're steadily talking about that. And we also need to align policy to those outcomes as well. And some of our policies are a bit outdated. Some of the way we operate is a bit outdated. But it also means that we need to move resources. When you think about what the Chairman said about welfare, 1948, 600 branches, 110,000 members. Where are we today? Our changing needs have changed. And yet we still align our thoughts and processes to those rigid boundaries in the sand. And yet we really need to think about how we deliver that. And we need to use the MTFP to make sure we have a good understanding and we've thoroughly checked everything. But clearly we've got some key challenges still. 100,000 should be a clear and consistent purpose in everybody's mind, whether that be member or employee alike. That's the goal. 100,000 means actually we'll become quite sustainable because we'll start to have filled all of those individual age gaps. We'll keep the conveyor belt going because we know we're going to lose people on the right-hand side and we know people are going to lapse. They're just going to stop paying their membership for a variety of reasons. And remember, last year when we contacted every member that lapsed, 45% of them lapsed for a welfare reason, not for a membership reason. So it's still important that branches follow up on their members that have lapsed to find out why. It's really important that we check on them. And lapsing responsibility, and I've said whose is it? Well, it's everybody's. Please don't just assume that Atlas House team will follow up on everybody that's lapsed. We will do our best to, but you're on the ground, you're the local people. You know Bill, you know Kate. We don't know them personally. You should know them personally, and you should be thinking, why haven't they come to a meeting? Where are they? Why haven't they paid their subs? Are they okay? And pick up the phone, pop round and see them. It's the same with recruitment. Again, it's everybody's responsibility. I make the plea again. Please recruit one member in 2019. If you do nothing else, recruit one member in 2019. And then the concept of branches, what are they for? Well, they're all about our welfare output through comradeship. We really need to think about that and what we do and how we support them. But the nature of a branch needs to change. You know, I go to branches where we meet in the bowling club. We go through an agenda. There's 6 people there. Is that a branch meeting? Is that really going to engage the 150 members of the branch? We need to think about that. So are we working in the right places in that sense, in branches, branch clubs, stations and sites, events around this membership agenda? And we have to take every opportunity to think about what we're doing there. We also need to have some more information about how we know which one of these works and where do we invest our resources better and change the resources we've currently got in place. And we know what success looks like, don't we? Because it's a stable and sustainable 100,000 members. And when we've got there, we know we're doing okay. The other one is around making sure that we are one of the leading providers of welfare to the RAF family. And we've got to make sure we do that. Again, I think that's a clear and consistent purpose for the organisation. And we need to, again, think about where are we working. And the Benevolent Fund are going to celebrate their centenary this year. And they're going to talk about reaching out to those people that are not on either of our radars. And I'm looking forward to a fantastic campaign from them to find some of the people that we don't know, the beneficiaries that we're not aware of today. The chairman talked about us having an audience of 1.3 million, 1.5, 1 million, whatever the number is. It's more than a million. But we've only got 74,000 members in our audience. Where's the other 900 to 1.2 million? Where are they? Maybe many of you know who they are. We just haven't engaged with them, either on a membership or a welfare basis. But a lot of them will probably require our support. And their campaign will really help us to help them to help us. And it's important that we recognise that. We also need to make sure we've got the money to pay for that. And we do need to continue to fundraise. We do need to continue to make sure our community activities work. And we need to move, which way are we? Are we supporter or product-led? We need to think about that. We need to think about, do we look at those who support us, or are we just looking at something to sell? Is it the gizzits and wizzits that the branches have? And we need to think about what we do there to make sure we can move that forward. We also need to make sure we diversify our income streams and we're not over-reliant on any single one area. That doesn't mean we, as we did in the past, say, well, we're relying too much on legacies, so we'll make all the legacy team redundant. It's rather a nebulous argument, isn't it? We need to support the legacy team, we need to grow the legacy team, but we also need to grow others. And, you know, I was quite surprised when I got here that we'd made redundant our legacy team. We also need to make sure, as the chairman touched on, that our organisation is fit and proper for the future and it does all the right things. And we're working really hard to make sure that happens. But we need you to work with us on this. And this is about governance, governance, governance. And you might be tired of us saying that. And I accept that. I understand it. I understand that in the late 90s, probably early noughties, the association probably went a little bit off course. And it stopped helping you to run your branches better and effectively. And you've been doing the best you can with little help from headquarters. But the legislation didn't go away. It was always there. The Charity Act has been there since 1940. It's not something new. Data protection didn't arrive with GDPR. It was here long before that. Health and safety was here long before that. And I know you're feeling a bit under pressure when we're starting to talk to you about making sure you conform. But it is all about the reputational risks that we face. And we need to really understand that governance is a vital part of what we're doing. And we need to make sure we're member, beneficiary and supporter-centric. Those are the key things that we're looking at. Because to coin a phrase from Bill Clinton, it's the governance, you can fill in the last word. And it's important that we keep doing that. It's important we work together, and the chairman's talked about that. And it's very pleasing to see David with us today and the support that they've given us through 2018 and we hope through 2019, 2020 and beyond as we move forward. And we're really looking forward to working together there. We do have some strategic objectives, which I hope you all know. They're really quite simple. It's all about welfare. It's all about championing the interests of our members. It's all about being a good organisation. It's all about having 100,000 and it's all about having a sustainable income stream. 5 really clear and consistent objectives for the future. If I've got my timing right, I'd also like now just to talk a little bit about last year and RAF 100 and what a fantastic opportunity that was for every branch to reach out into their communities and work hard together. So hopefully Thank you.
Thank you. Nick, thank you very much indeed. And did I detect a bit of Kylie Minogue in the background of that music there? Dodgy taste in music from the Secretary-General. Moving swiftly on, Brian, may I ask you to come to the stage and talk to the resolution to receive a presentation from the task placed upon Council last year at conference. Thank you.
President, delegates, Brian Pattison for Council, speaking for the resolution. At Annual Conference 2018, the Northern Area Council proposed, seconded by the South East and Eastern Area Council, that Council should review the requirement set out in the Governance Handbook for branches to be registered as charities in their own right and report back to Conference 2019. Delegates at Annual Conference 2018 approved that resolution with 81.2% in favour. In effect, Conference asked Council to explore the options for the association and branches operating as a single organisation. We've termed this piece of work One Charity. Conference will notice that there are no substantive resolutions regarding One Charity on the agenda today. We are simply asking Conference to receive a presentation setting out some of the potential implications, the process by which the change could be implemented, and then to seek Conference's agreement to continue with the One Charity review, with a complete report and substantive resolutions on any changes to be considered by Conference 2020. This resolution enables the Secretary-General to present to Conference in Conference and will form part of the record of Conference for the future. I therefore ask all delegates to vote for this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And can I confirm South East and Eastern area are happy to continue to second? Yes. Thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, as this is a directed task from last year's conference, unless there is any objection, I would wish to go straight to the presentation. Is there an objection? Thank you. Yes. Okay, would you like to come to the stage and give your view?
Bob Bertram, Chairman, Edinburgh Lothians and Borders Branch. The only objection I'm actually raising with this is that if I'm looking at the resolution on the board there, I think my branch and myself would approve that. But if the next bit that was tagged on verbally about, how is it worded, giving permission to carry on with the review, we're not so sure about that, because that's not actually on the written resolution. We were quite happy to approve hearing the report, of course we would, but not so happy about giving permission to carry on with the review.
Bob, thank you very much indeed. Well, as you are content to accept and you are the only person to object, I suggest that we hear the presentation and we hear how complete that work is and whether it is of a standard that is capable at this point of having a view, or whether there is more work required to actually get it to a point where there's something for this conference and the delegates to have a view about. So, Bob, thank you for your time. Nick, would you please come to the stage and make the presentation?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Conference. Just remind ourselves of the starting point. What was the resolution that was passed last year, I think by over 83% of the delegates present and voting, was to examine and review the branches becoming legally part of the association. What we've been undertaking is a lot of consultation to identify where we are in terms of the overall process. So I've met with, or spoken to, or corresponded with all of these people. In particular, we've retained the services of Bates, Wells and Braithwaite, who are specialist charity lawyers who helped the government draft the 2011 Charities Act, so they really should know what's in it. And we've also sought the guidance of a specialist charity QC to make sure that we understand the implications therein. But we have had extensive correspondence and meetings, particularly with the Charity Commission for England and Wales and the Office of the Scottish Charity Regulator. Just to remind everybody where we're starting from, branches are all charities in the main, and branches and clubs are unincorporated associations, which means that liability rests with the trustees of the individual branch, the committee. And if you're on a committee, you are a trustee. And I do know that there's a bit of confusion there. But if you're a member of a branch committee, you are a trustee of that branch. You are governed effectively by a charity law, whether it be English, Scottish, Northern Ireland, as appropriate, and the governance handbook. And in broad terms, you will find the definitions to the laws that you have to conform to within the governance handbook. The association itself is incorporated by Royal Charter, which is the oldest form of incorporation and dates back to the medieval years. So the association itself has a limited liability position. We looked at, well, why would we do this? And what are the issues? And this was one of the questions that we've been asked by the regulators, was there is clearly an issue about the vulnerability of smallness. I'm not sure smallness is a real word, but you all know what I mean. Because most branches are micro charities. Most branches have an average turnover of £2,500 per year. They're not large, they don't spend a lot of money, but they do an important charitable aspect in terms of that welfare work. And that's the thing that we need to think about. There are clearly some financial pressures on a number of branches. There are certainly governance issues across some branches, some of which are quite significant, and the external environment is changing. Again, the chairman touched on some of the reputational issues that other charities have seen by their activities, and we're also seeing our principal regulators become more active with their regulation. And we actually need to think about, are we meeting our members' and beneficiaries' needs, and can we do that more effectively? So these are the sort of exam questions that we were set. So just to recoup on the main proposals, branches want to become legally part. It was quite clear from talking to branches that you wanted to retain an identity, a local one, but identify yourselves under the corporate charity number 226686. And actually some of you already do that, more in mistake than actual. And of course, when you're collecting for Wings Appeal, you also identify under the corporate number. And the key thing in terms of the feedback from committee members is you did not want to be trustees of a charity. So we looked at, and in consultation with the regulators, how could that be achieved? And at the moment we have some area regulations. They would be replaced with terms of reference for how a branch would run. We've discussed again, could a branch committee continue to run a branch? I know that sounds an odd question to ask, but we wanted to confirm it with the regulators. And the answer to that was yes. A branch committee could continue to run the affairs of the branch at a local level, even when they're part of one charity. But the sticking point for all of the regulators we've spoken to and or corresponded with is around finance, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. Importantly, council would then take on all of the liabilities of the branches, all of the legal responsibilities, particularly for those branches with a building. Then the council would take on the maintenance and refurbishment responsibilities and liabilities as well. And they would all sit with the council. And just to expand on that a little bit further, the association in the main, not exclusively, but almost in the main, is already the custodian trustee of nearly every property that's in the association family, as it were, either whether it's freehold or leasehold. So most of them already sit with the association. However, if we went to one charity, then the beneficial ownership of that building would transfer across. We already have the beneficial ownership of a number of buildings, but all of the buildings would move across, and then we would assume the responsibilities. I can just pause here and remind you of the branch club debate. This all fits together with that programme. In England and Wales, branches would be removed from the register, and in Scotland it would be a Section 18 proposal. And the position in Northern Ireland, we are awaiting the Charity Commission Northern Ireland's response to a fairly detailed letter that we wrote to them after some initial correspondence, because they weren't quite sure whether or not the branches were already part of the association in Northern Ireland or whether they were separate. And they can't answer that question just yet, and they have gone to their legal advisors to find out what the answer is. And I did check last week if they'd had a response yet, and we're still awaiting them to tell us where we are. We've also thought about, but haven't come up with an answer for what our branches in Europe and overseas would do, because we equally recognise the 17 branches in Europe all sit within a different legal jurisdiction, some of which recognise charities, some which don't recognise charities, some which have special effects on it, others that also have to deal with a regional issue within the country within which they operate. So there's a lot of additional work still to be done there. What was interesting from the regulators was that being a charity or not does not enhance nor reduce a branch's ability to deliver the objects of the association. They did not see being a charity per se as being important to the delivery of the objects of the association. We also recognise, and it's probably been demonstrated by Bob, that many branches have a feeling of independence already, and that they're a registered charity in their own right, and are able to operate within, the fairly generous parameters within the governance handbook. But again, the regulators also recognise that the association has significant oversight and control to the point of being able to close a branch through the governance handbook, and using the powers vested in it through the governance handbook through council and area councils, who ultimately have the authority to close branches. And as you know, from time to time, we have had to close delinquent branches. The regulators also were keen to remind us that the public doesn't differentiate between the association and a branch, or a branch and the association. And that comes back to some of the reputational issues. And in many ways, the regulators recognised, inverted commas, branches being part of the association, because every branch's objects are the governance handbook. So whether you're registered with the Charity Commission or with OSCA, then the governance handbook is lodged with those regulators as the objects for all of our branches and the association. Excuse me. And as such, again, they use the term quasi-subsidiaries of the association. So the regulator's view is very much that they see us as the responsible body, as in the corporate association, for our branches. They also said that the council, as in the trustees of the association, should any merger occur, is that they would require assurance over the due diligence process to make sure that the trustees of the association had adequate oversight of compliance and risk at all levels. And this comes in down to this point of the regulator's concern around a de facto trustee relationship created at branch level. And what do the regulators mean by a de facto trustee relationship? And they keep coming back to one single aspect of running a branch, and that is your delegated authority in a one charity approach to spend money and to hold money, and where that should sit. So we've had some dialogue with particularly the Charity Commission over this level. Oscar will be happy to be guided, I think, in a sense, by the Charity Commission. And we talked about a figure of around £5,000. So why did I choose 5,000 as our debating point for the regulator? Well, I go back to the statement I made earlier about the average turnover of a branch is about £2,500. So if you're turning over £2,500 a year and you've got 1 year of reserves, in broad terms, that's £5,000. So that it would be under the direct control of branch committee at local level. Where the regulators then went on to talk about was, well, what about branches that have got significant funds? What are you going to do about that? Because they're already asking us to deal with branches that have significant funds. And essentially, although we've put this proposition to the regulators, this is no change from what happens today. If you have significant funds that you don't need, there is the branch deposit fund for you to place the deposits in so they can be managed under the required legislation and regulation. And as you saw from the Treasurer's response, we do quite well at that. But that money remains designated to the branch currently. In the future, the money would be put into the branch deposit fund designated for the branch. So there's no real change into the way forward. Or you could simply make a donation of the excess funds into the Wings appeal. And I think it's interesting how the regulators have really focused around this financial aspect. But they see this as being the key thing. And I know that for most branches, that's not really an issue because most branches don't have that. We also talked about the in-year peaks and troughs, because if you're collecting for Wings, your balance might well grow as you get towards the Wings appeal amount. But of course, you've got to transfer that into the Wings appeal before the year end. So at the year end, you're in a position there to be at or around the £5,000 mark. We also had a long conversation with the regulators about is this an all or nothing approach? And they were very clear that if conference decides that this is a one charity decision, as in our rules, it's a binding decision on conference, on the association. So it's an all or nothing approach. What they were also very clear about, and it probably doesn't touch too many in this room, because oddly enough, you're probably the better branches, but remember there's 200 plus branches not here. If you don't do one charity, that's fine, but you comply with everything. There'll be no leeway given in the future. At the moment, we manage many of our issues through dialogue and conversation. They're really clear. If you're going to go forward and decide not to do this after 2020, that's fine, not a problem. But we will expect every branch to comply with their regulatory duties under the Charities Act and others. They will not put up with the opaqueness that we currently have. The other thing that we were clear about with the regulators was whether or not this proposal detracted from the comradeship and the welfare objects of the association. And we all agreed that if you went to one charity, there would be no material difference in comradeship and the welfare by charitable means of the RAF family as currently stated in our objects. There's no need to change our objects. And obviously if we were changing our fundamental objects, we have to go back to the Charity Commission, Privy Council, Her Majesty, etc. And this is the point, they see it as a binding decision. And of course it is a matter for conference to decide. It's not a matter for the team at Atlas House, we're just enablers in this process. And they see it as being something that they would endorse. They didn't blackball it. And the first thing we've really checked this whole process is it legally possible to do it? And then, is it actually possible to do it from a regulatory and legislative position? And the answer to that is yes. But equally, both the regulators and ourselves, we recognise that that might not be palatable to all members. And that's a decision subject to the decision of conference that they will have to address themselves. We also listened at the area conferences, and a similar version of this presentation was given to every area conference, and I've picked up the main issues from the feedback there. The first one was building. In fact, again, 9 out of 10 people probably want to get rid of their building because they see the liabilities, the problems, the maintenance, the upkeep, etc. of it. A few don't, and we understand that. We have significant funds in our branch. Well, if you put them in the branch deposit fund today or in 2021, there's effectively no change. It's designated funds for the branch in the branch deposit funds. And when you think about it, there's already £2 million from about 85 branches sat in the branch deposit fund that we manage on their behalf for their benefit. But we do not, it's not our money, we don't own it, it's not ours, we just manage it on their behalf. And if they need it to deliver the objects of the association, they can draw down on it. Will you have to still report to the regulators? The answer will be no. You still have to report to the association, but not to the regulators, so it's a different process. I want to stay as a separate charity. You've seen the comments from the regulators. The decision of conference is binding. Is this a takeover by HQ? Well, I don't think so. I think I'm trying to enable the decisions that were taken at the conference last year to get you to this point. And then the other question was, could it happen tomorrow? Well, I've paraphrased that to when can it happen? It can only happen at the pace you, conference, determine. Once you've made a decision, there will then be a plan that follows through. And if you decide not to do it, that's fine. If you decide to do it, that's also fine, but understand the consequences. So the next step is it'll move away from the work that Vicky and I in particular have been doing with the regulators, because we've got a clear position with them. And Council will establish a working group under the chairmanship of the Vice Chair of Council, Brian Patterson. And the Chairman of Council has suggested that in broad terms, the Vice Chairs of the area councils join the working group to give representation from all of the areas. For reasons you'll understand, suggested that David Hewings, given his resolution later in the agenda. Neville Drury is somebody that we've also suggested because Neville runs a committee of only associate members who run a branch. And we felt that was important that we make sure there. And then we've invited Graham because he runs the second largest branch in the country and a very, very successful club. And he's one of the people who will be on the right-hand side of the agenda, not wanting to give us his building. So we thought it was important that we deal with that. And then ex officio on the committee, the President, Chairman and myself. So that will be the working group that will take the work forward through to Conference 2020. What do we expect the working group to be doing, which is to complete the initial consultations and any further ones that needs done, reach some consensus over what the outline model will be and how that could go forward, agree some timescales and some activities, also some proposals around how it fits together, putting a proper definition together of the business case, what we'll do around the leadership issues, how we might look at that, what are the human factors involved, and I didn't want to put egos, personalities or vested interests in there, but you know what I'm talking about. Making sure we have a communications program in place, that we identify what might be a deal breaker for members, branches and conference, what the plans would be for the merger and beyond, what resources would be required, how we deal with the different organisational cultures, and by that I predominantly mean branches that would have resided in other regulators' areas, so Northern Ireland and Scotland in particular, and to make sure that we work closely with our external advisors so that any guidance or advice that's subsequently given to conference is sound and solid. Subject to your confirmation, affirmation or consensus, essentially we do not see this as being a big bang approach. We see this as being a progressive one which is likely to last out to 2022, if not slightly longer. And at the moment, as I would summarise, all we've been able to do is say, yes, it's legally possible to do it. Yes, it is possible to do it. There's a lot more work to be done. And in the context of a great man's words, we're not at the end of the beginning of the end, we're at the end of the beginning of the process. There's a huge amount to do now from this time going forwards that the working group will have to pick up. Conference, thank you for your time.
Nick, thank you for that presentation. And what I'd like to do is to invite the other officers who've just presented, with yourself, Nick, on stage to answer questions on both the presentations that they made and you have made. But I also note, just from my take on your presentation, that the work thus far does not answer the question that was set in last year's conference, in that the detail and the work has yet to be done. I take note of Bob Bertram from Edinburgh and Lothian's comment that he wouldn't wish to see any work being done, but I think let's have some questions to tease out. Certainly, from what I can see, there is more that needs to be done before the response from last year's conference is mature enough for future conference to make any decision on what to do with that information. But I open the floor. Have we got folk out there with microphones? Can we have the lights up, please, so that those who are answering questions can actually see the person asking it? Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Michael, Skipton Branch. I'd like to ask a question. If this afternoon the one man, one vote comes in, will there be a delegated vote for this next year?
Brian. Sorry, buddy.
If the one man, one vote goes through today, will there be
Well, if I may make a procedural comment, you're asking a question on something for which we don't know the answer because we haven't had that. So absolutely right to ask that question after the effect, but it's putting folk on the spot to come up with a personal view rather than a considered view. However, we're all mature, a personal view, should you wish it, Mr. Chairman.
Going to use the lecture. Sorry? Come on. Yeah.
Well, Chairman, I think I said earlier on in my presentation, I used the word could from the point of view of the single charity, not would. Yes, I believe that if the source of the investigation into the single charity is positive in Council's view, then probably yes, at the conference next year, there will be a presentation leading up to an acceptance or otherwise of the single charity, and subsequent to that, if it is approved by Conference 2020, then yes, there will be delegate voting thereafter.
Mr. Chairman, are you comfortable with that representation?
Well, I think there is the issue that, as you rightly say, if one member, one vote is agreed upon this time, then the process for voting is going to change.
Right, so it's not clear.
No, it isn't clear.
Right. The answer to your question is, it is not yet clear because we haven't got to that point. So it can't be clear if we haven't had the vote on the question you first asked. So let's get to that bridge when we come to it, because I am not certain at what stage and at what point in space that one member, one vote would become active, because I haven't heard the debate yet, but let's wait out. But thank you for your question. It's just another one of those grey areas that perhaps needs to be addressed through questioning. Next question, please.
David Norbury, Ellesmere Branch. Just one question. Two things are stuck in my mind, and rather a lot of stuff we've had to take in this morning. That is the increase in membership and the closure of branches. Is there any evidence, please, that because of this, the remaining branches have increased their membership?
I didn't catch the first part of that. There's a reduction in the number of branches and a growth in members. Yeah. Do we think that the...
Have you got a copy of the RAF Association annual report? You'll see in that annual report from pages 6 through to about 21, the pluses and minuses and movement with respect to the membership of individual branches. And therefore, if one turns to the rear page, you'll see that the membership for the year identified 2018 has gone up to what is 75,254 compared to 73,771 from the previous year. Clearly there are some people who are members of two branches, but identified within the annual report, which I think was in the conference pack, it identifies each branch and where the increase in membership has gone. Thank you. Next question, please.
Chris Hill, Gloucester Branch. Of the things I learnt during the Air Force, two of the things I'm interested in is when this comes back and you do the full business case, will that be costed? Because there is a clear high cost of going through the process, and I suspect there is a headcount cost on headquarters if we do go through the process. And the second part of the question on helpfulness or benefits or whatever, I'm concerned that if we don't have a fairly unanimous vote on this, then there will be a fraction that will want to be disenfranchised or committees will walk away. And recognising branches I've talked to, that won't be easy, replacing branch committees or branch structures.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, you will get a costed report, absolutely. Before Council will approve anything coming forward to conference, it will all have been fed into our medium-term financial plan. So an understanding of the cost implications, and there will be, as you say, a need, almost certainly, if Council are going to take on additional responsibilities to cover that at the centre, there will be an increase in the headcount. Won't be large, but there will be some increase. But there will be offsets against that. There are areas where we've identified some cost savings in terms of property management, in terms of the way that accounts are reviewed and so on. So there will be pluses and minuses. That will all have to be shaken through and understood. And absolutely, if there is a large cost implication, that may be one of the cons and reasons that people do not want to go forwards with it. Equally, you may find that it's a small cost for big advantage, not sure. The second part of your question was in terms of the committees. I'm not sure I fully understand that, because the point that was made is that branches, the committees, are going to be able to continue to run the branches. Let's not lose sight of the fact. What are we here for? It's for the object of the association. Through comradeship, the comradeship engendered by the members, that welfare support. If we're thinking that this is all about something else, well, we've lost the plot. So be careful. The branch committees, because, as we say, our findings are showing a large number of them have said they would like to have those responsibilities taken away from them. But having those responsibilities taken away, in many cases, I see that as being then the opportunity for them to focus on what the branches, the clubs, are there to deliver, the objects of the association. So I'm not sure that we will see people walking away, or we shouldn't do. But it's a fair point, and it's worth debating. Thanks, Chris.
Ian Norris from the Western Branch, and Club, of course. The question that comes to mind is what you're going to do is take over the building, the assets, and the money from the club and the branch. The money that clubs might have in the bank will be banked with yourselves. And if they wanted it, they can have some of it anytime they wanted to. But will it be ring-fenced for that club, and that you will use, as you said, the funding for refurbishment from the 5 million that's going to be put aside for that, and not use the club's money that they handed over to you?
Yeah, it's all of the above. At the moment, we have identified that £5 million to fill gaps if the gaps exist. But if a club, a branch, has the money, has the resource, they should be spending that themselves. Okay? That's the way it's always been. But your money would go into that pot, and it will be ring-fenced for the club's use. And that will be property maintenance and so on.
John, thank you. It's a bit like the Spanish Inquisition sitting here. I can't see anybody out there, but I understand John Gilmore next, and then Bob Bertram.
Right, John Gilmore, Dunstable branch. Just a quick thing on Nick's presentation, where he says about engaging with the community, right, at branch level. My question is, why isn't our national conference engaging with the local community here? At previous conferences, we've always had a local dignitary from the local council or something. They're not here. Have we engaged with the local community, or we hired ourselves to make ourselves a secret organisation? Thank you.
Well, I can answer that one, John. I'm sure the Deputy Lieutenant, when he arrives later today, will be delighted to meet you, shake you by the hand, and thank you for your question. Right, moving swiftly on. Bob.
Bob Bertram, the Chairman, Edinburgh Lothians and Borders Branch. The B word Brexit has now been mentioned 3 times, if I'm correct, and I'm just going to mention it for a 4th time. Presuming that Council has had Brexit on its risk register for some considerable time, can I ask if the other risk with regard to a possible another Scottish independence referendum and the consequences for the breakup of the UK for the third sector and RAF in particular. I've no ulterior motive or political motive for asking the question, just asking. Thank you.
No, we don't actually have the breakup of the Union as a strategic risk. Brexit is within our consideration. As you just heard from the Secretary-General, the charities north of the border already come under a different regulator. So if you go independent, I guess you will continue under a separate regulator. But, you can still be part of the association. And if the agreement is that you come under a single association, then at the moment the agreements are that it goes to the regulator where the charity actually resides, its headquarters. So it will then come under the Charity Commission for England and Wales. So it is something that we are thinking about, but not in terms of any catastrophic events should the union split up.
Michael, thank you.
Nick. Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Is it me?
We've got 3 standing. We've got 2 up. Michael's next.
I'm glad you're controlling it, because I can't see anything ahead. If you can just line the questions up, that'd be super. Well done.
Good morning, Mr. President. Alan Weston, Woking and Woodley branch. A question for clarification, please, from the one charity report from the Secretary-General. It's to do with deposit accounts held by branches who are holding sums of above £5,000 in their branch accounts at this moment on deposit. If the goes forward and this money then is transferred up to accounts that's held by a central council, etc., will it be ring-fenced fully, or will there be times when that money can be actually controlled by headquarters and taking the control away from branches? Thank you.
Can I apologise to the conference, because clearly I've not been clear. I've used the term designated funds throughout my presentation. If I'd not used the word designated but used the word ring-fenced, would that have made it clearer? If so, I apologise. Your funds will be ring-fenced for the branch. It will not be used by the association for other reasons while they are ring-fenced, designated, that's the legal term, to the branch. Okay.
Michael Dixon, Shoreham. Nick, would you be willing to come to an arranged region meeting where we could invite all the branches, treasurers to come, or anybody else in the region that might be interested to of your personal presentation that you gave us here. Would you be willing to?
Michael, as you know, I'm always happy to come and see you in Shoreham and any other branches that would like to invite me.
Hello, Glenn Connor from Northampton branch. I know when, after we had to unfortunately sell our club, we got a fair bit of cash. And we found that the banks were quite willing to look after our money for us, but weren't actually willing to give us anything for their privilege of looking after the money, whilst they were obviously making something themselves. So we found somewhere that gave us a small interest. I was wondering, is there a decent amount of interest coming if the money goes across into your ring-fenced accounts? Because well, at the moment we're getting slightly less than 1%, which is still better than the bank could offer.
Thank you for that. Yeah, we have, I'll use the more colloquial language, a hare and tortoise approach then. So we have two accounts structured. One with Rathbones, where you get, I think it's 1% return, but your funds are guaranteed. So the association will underwrite the funds. So if you put £10,000 in, and like you did the last quarter, the markets went down by 12%, so you'd only have 8,800 left in, for example, and you needed that 10,000 then we'll underwrite that. But you don't get a big interest rate return. We also have a separate portfolio with Rothschilds, which is a higher rate of return, and their target rate of return is RPI plus 400 basis points, or in layman's terms, somewhere around 6% per annum. They're not quite achieving it, they're at 4 and a bit, but 4 and a bit is much better than you'll get in the banks. But that's at risk. If the market goes up and down, your investment goes with the market. We know over time, the market in the investments goes up. So there's a hare approach and a tortoise approach, depending on the risk profile that the branch committee decides upon where you want to put it. But both will probably give you a better return in most cases than the banks are today.
Paul Sweeney, Kettering branch. Over here. Could you please explain to me very simply the impact for the branches for things like public insurance, liability insurance and the like, how to one branch, one charity? Thank you.
Our initial investigations, and I can't see Vicky to confirm the nods, is that we would need to insure you all centrally. So there'd be a central cost to that. That would probably be offset by some other costs that we identified through doing an analysis. So, for example, all the branches in the association spend just over £250,000 a year having their accounts either audited or examined. We believe we can do that cheaper with some staff to audit everybody's accounts, and then can also work as internal auditors for the organisation. So things like public liability insurance would be dealt with centrally on behalf of all of the branch committees if you were in a one charity approach. So the cost that's going out per branch could be rechanneled in a different way or savings made. More work to be done.
Good day. I'm John Salt from the Stafford branch. A question first, I've got two questions. A question first for Nick and then one for the chairman. Nick, if our money goes into the deposit fund, can I have that money back, or can we have that money back in any circumstances?
The answer to that is yes. There is always a caveat, providing you want to spend it on the objects of the association.
Okay, thank you. And John, if a branch or member wishes to contact the council direct, how would we go about that? I had difficulty actually approaching the council about a week ago, so I did find a means of doing it, but can you tell me what the procedure is to get to the council straight away?
You need to go through the headquarters. That is the address for all the council members. We all have a RAF email address. But if you go through to Hannah, the secretary there, she will distribute it direct to the council member that you have addressed it to.
David Hodgson, Morecambe and Lancaster branch. I have two simple questions, which probably only require a simple answer. The first one is, my branch wanted some indication if the conference decides to accept one charity, do we have any projected timescale before this will actually happen?
If you recall my last slide, if your conference approves it in 2020, if conference approved it, then I would expect that it wouldn't be finished until at least the end of 2022, possibly 2023, because at the moment the regulators are suggesting that we have to do a merger for every branch individually. We can't collectively just pull you all in. We've got to go through the process of every branch. So if we have to do 350 branch mergers, well, we're not going to do that overnight.
And that follows on with the question, which is part of the reason why our chairman has just resigned. Will becoming one charity involve a snowstorm of paperwork?
I don't think so. What we've looked at with the guidance of the Charity Commission are some simple documents that enable the transfer. The key areas where there will be more information required is if in that due diligence process you identify you have liabilities. So 99% of branches won't. So branches with a branch club and a building may have a number of liabilities that they need to disclose to us before we go into the merger process. And again, if you recall my presentation, if you were here last year, when I tried to guide conference and members in things that you should be doing rather than not doing, if you think of the branches that are not doing those things, those are the ones we'll have to spend more time with. But a well-run branch, as yours is, of course, it'll be a fairly simple process.
Can I just add to that? If the decision is taken by conference that we are going to move to the single charity, council would not allow it, everything to then slide down to the branches to deal with. The whole idea of this that is being put forward, my understanding is, and you've just alluded to it by saying that your chairman's resigned because of the workload. The whole idea of this is to lift that workload. As Nick said, there will be an amount of work, but that would have to be picked up by a team in the headquarters, and council would make sure that that was put in place. So absolutely what Nick has just said, there isn't going to be a mass of paperwork coming down onto the branches. The whole concept is about lifting a lot of that responsibility.
Ladies and gentlemen, two more questions, please, for us to keep on schedule.
Ladies and gentlemen, I may look like it, but I'm not the driver of the mystery tour to Blackpool today. I'm driving tomorrow. Percy Connolly, Chairman of the Bedford branch. 60 years ago, I joined the Royal Air Force, and I was told, or informed, to join the Benevolent Fund. 14 years later, I left the Air Force and found out about the association and became a life member. How many other members of the Royal Air Force are supporters of the Benevolent Fund but are not members of the association and could become and lift our membership considerably?
And David Johnson?
The controller of the Benevolent Fund, maybe if you can have a microphone, David.
David Murray, I run the RAF Benevolent Fund. Actually, there are more people joining the Royal Air Force Association now at Halton and at Cranwell than are joining the Benevolent Fund. They don't join the Benevolent Fund, we just, because we're not a membership organisation, we provide other facilities for them. The teams are working very closely together, our teams are working very closely together at Halton and at Cranwell to make sure that that's the case, because it works both ways.
I have around the area 2 or 3 Air Force bases. So one is closing. But members of my club belong to the golf club. And they go around and say, oh, mate, group captain so-and-so, wing commander so-and-so. They're all members of the Benevolent Fund, but they don't come to the club and support us. If they came only twice a week or once every 4 times a year and give us support, we would increase our membership by maybe 15 to 20%.
Right. Well, thank you very much indeed for that. As David said, the Benevolent Fund is not a membership organisation, but I understand the intent and passion with respect to your comment. Thank you. And the last question, please.
David Johnson, Southfield, and I will take the offer of a bus ride back to Blackpool if I can. Mine is a more general question. To make my report to my branch members better than it would be by a verbal one, are the slides that have been used today available in a pack at the end of conference?
My understanding is that all this is being streamed and is recorded so people can actually download the whole presentation and whole conference. Hence why we're being blinded, so it can be put onto the internet. I'm sure there'll be a link put up at some point to guide folk to that.
I can't speak for other branches, but I can guarantee that most of my members of the branch are in excess of 65, and if you mention streaming to them, they think you were going fishing.
Well, maybe you can help them do that.
Can I just confirm that the one charity, all but the last 3 slides of the one charity presentation are already on the portal and have been on the portal since the area conferences were completed, as has the one member, one vote presentation. So both of those were uploaded the day after the last area conference was completed.
Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. It is clear to me that there are more questions than there are answers because the work that's been conducted thus far is insufficiently complete for conference to be able to take a view one way or the other than perhaps to consider more work to be done. Bob has already voiced his objection to work being done. I have some difficulty with that because the work being done should be that to answer the questions, to deliver to conference the opportunity to consider. However, I can sense that there is some passion there. My view initially was clearly there's more work to be done, so get on with it and come back to us. And why have you been so slow, Secretary General, in the course of your duty? Rap on knuckles. I'm still of that view, but I would like to hear if there's anybody other than Bob that objects to further work being done to answer the question that we, Council, were given to answer on our behalf, on conference behalf, last year. This does not answer the question sufficiently for, to my satisfaction, conference to consider the answer. So therefore, more work needs to be done for conference to take a position. The extant question on task that was posed last year has not been satisfied, but I would wish to hear if by call of objection for those who are delegates, if there is objection to more work being conducted. Now, please. Two from 122 gives me a 98% vote that or opinion that more work needs to continue. We need to recognise the question with respect to one member, one vote and the link that you had. Bob, I'm not sure with respect to why you were objecting for further work, but I'm sure that can be teased out as the team progress in terms of questioning, which needs to be inclusive because there are 363 branches and therefore 363 sets of issues which may be different, and that needs to be taken into consideration in the work that it continues. So I take by the survey that we have just done that more work needs to be done to satisfy the itch, and in particular the question with respect to one member, one vote, and whatever it is, Bob, behind your objection to further work needs to be looked at. Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. And I've just been briefed by my erstwhile friend on the left that an abridged report of this conference, plus all the slides, will be produced. Now, as we have just heard, there are many sensitive and difficult issues that sit before us as we move forward. And at a time when there is considerable change brought by legal statute and Charities Commission direction sitting upon us, it's essential that our association is led with clarity of thought and with purposeful energy. As we've heard yet again, John Cliff, we have been fortunate to have benefited from his experience of process and his maturity of deed since he was elected by acclaim as Chairman of Council at the 2016 annual conference. And I move that in order that we might continue to capitalise upon his leadership as we ride the waves of these significant challenges to our structure and outputs over the next 3 years, I ask that Conference re-elects by acclaim John Cliff as our Chairman. May I have that, ladies and gentlemen? I'm most grateful to you, and as you can see, one needs to have that level-headed, mature, open and unbiased approach as we move forward, because every one of the 363 branches has issues and factors that need to be taken into account, and to have a proper, mature discussion without forming a view on perception, to be able to have the access, as somebody over there said, I think from Stafford, of being confident that they know the mind of the man who is chairing our trustees for the whole of our charity, so that we have confidence through open dialogue, mature discussion, but most importantly, trust runs right through this association. The same way that the 31,500 members of the Royal Air Force have trust in the Air Force Board and the Chief of the Air Staff, we need to continue to engender that in terms of recognising our role within our association. So thank you for your support for John. Now, 3 formal tasks I have before the opportunity for folk to East Springs and have some lunch. Firstly is the vote on the financial report. May we have, please, your consideration through the voting process. We need to propose and second, do we? Right. It's already being proposed, I think, by Council through the Treasurer. May I have a seconder for the financial report? Thank you very much. Off we go on the voting. Are we green? I can't see the bloody thing. No, there are no round numbers in finance. Thank you very much indeed for your patience with that. And therefore, while we have had proposed the annual report by the Chairman, may I have a seconder? Thank you very much, Gloucester. And when the screen has cleared, over to you, ladies and gentlemen, when it goes green to vote. Thank you very much. Hang on. No, this is the Treasurer's and Finance Audit Report. The annual report was the one we were voting on. The slide that came up with the voting for the last one was a repeat of the financial report, not the annual report slide. For the gentleman at the back with the control over the voting mechanism, can we please go back to voting on the annual report for 2018 so that we have the right slide that comes up with a result? Thank you. I understand that from the device on my left that they're on the case and they'll be sorting it out shortly. You were very nearly there. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. If we take your votes now on the Chairman's report. Ladies and gentlemen, can we turn to a different way of doing this to avoid the hassle? Would those who do not wish to accept the Chairman's report please say nay? Will those who wish to accept it please say aye? Aye. Thank you very much indeed. And bearing in mind that we have some wiggly ants problem, the proposer for the auditors was taken with the finance report. May I have a seconder for the auditor? Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, for those who do not wish to reappoint the auditors, say nay. Those who do wish to accept and reappoint the auditors, say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. Lunch is served. Please return. So that we can conduct business. Business needs to start at 13:10, so 13:05. Thank you very much.